Morning and welcome to the 7th meeting of the Citizens Participation and Public Petitions Committee of 2024. We've received apologies from Faisal Chowdhury, who is unable to join us this morning, and my colleague Fergus Ewing is joining us online from Inverness. My other colleague, our other colleague Maurice Golden, is en route from another committee which has been meeting this morning. So hence, thank you for your forbearance in allowing a slightly later start to help him to arrive. So the first item on the agenda is a rather dry item. It's for David Fergus and I to agree to consider any evidence that we might hear this morning in private under items 4 and 5. Are you content?
Content.
Thank you. That brings us to item 2 on the agenda, which is the consideration of continued petitions. And the first of these is petition number 2018 to recognise the value of swimming pools and provide financial relief to keep pools open. This has been lodged by Helen Plank on behalf of Scottish Swimming, who I gather is with us in the gallery this morning. We last considered this in January this year, and at that point agreed that the right way forward for us, because it's an issue that I think all of the committee were concerned to see addressed fully, was for us to have a roundtable discussion on the issues raised. And at that meeting, we also agreed to seek further information from COSLA and individual local authorities. And in advance of today's meeting, we've received written responses from COSLA, Dundee City Council, and also again from the petitioner. And we've also received representations in support of the petition from other MSP colleagues, Tim Eagle and Beatrice Wishart. All those papers were in, all those submissions were within the papers attached to the meeting. So we've got 2 panels with us this morning. And on the first panel, we've got John Lunn, the Chief Executive of Scottish Swimming. We've got Derek McGowan, the coach in the East Kilbride Swimming Club. We've got Duncan Scott, OBE, who is an Olympic gold medal winning swimmer and, in fact, Scotland's most decorated Olympic athlete. A touch of lustre to the rather dry proceedings of the Scottish Parliament. And Abby Thompson, a young volunteer programme champion with Scottish Swimming. And we will be hearing from a second group of a second panel later. And we're also joined this morning by our colleague Neil Bibby, MSP, who has taken an interest in this petition and indeed was, I think, with us when we last considered that we would go with the roundtable discussion. And Mr Bibby is going to be with us with this panel this morning. I think is then leaving us after that, but he'll be with us for that. So I think we're going to move straight into questions. If you would like to indicate to me if you'd like to speak, or if you can nod to each other and decide if you're going to speak, it helps for us to say who's speaking, because the official report won't necessarily just know who it is that's speaking. So it allows me just to, through the chair, invite you to contribute. You know, I turned 66 over the recess, and when I was at school, swimming, it wasn't seen as some people seem to think of it, as just a recreational hobby. Learning to swim was seen as a vital and essential life-saving tool. That, you know, we were learning to swim because we might be in a circumstance on an island and a nation that has always had great interest in water and the sea, that we had to learn how to swim. And I really, therefore, was very surprised when we were considering this petition earlier, that's just not now normally the case. And I had a look round my own constituency of Eastwood, and actually it seems we're quite well served in Eastwood. We still have school swimming pools, and all of the schools have got programmes where everybody is encouraged and is able, as part of the curriculum, to have the opportunity to learn how to swim. So I'm pleased about that, but it's not necessarily the norm any longer. And so I suppose I start by saying we understand that 40% of children are now leaving primary school unable to swim. And why is there that focus not on swimming? And what effect does the closure of swimming pools around Scotland have on the future of the ability of young people to swim? Because in some cases we're now talking about fairly significant geographical distances between where somebody is and where the nearest available pool might be. And so I'd be very interested to get your perspective on possibly your experience of of coming into swimming, and also what you think the consequence of that might now be. So I don't know who would like to kick off first. John Lunn.
Mr. Chair. Nice to meet you all today, and thanks very much for inviting us all along, and hopefully you get some useful information to add to the extensive evidence that's already been provided. I think it's important just to pick up on one of the points you said about your age and you're an active swimmer in your local community. Swimming is really something that is intergenerational. We see that a lot. It is something that children, if they learn to swim very young and very early, continue to do through their life and well into adulthood and older age, and it is something that families can do and do together. So it's a really important life skill. If you don't learn it when you're younger, and at primary school in particular, you can't do any of that later on. So it's really important in that regard. It's also a gateway activity into other sports. It helps people if they want to do other water-based activities and water-based sports. And as an island nation with 11,800 kilometres of coastline and 3,000 inland waterways, you were never far from water in society in this country anyway. The other important part linked to that is safety. And unfortunately, what we have seen, and we know it will happen again over the summer, is instances of people having terrible accidents. And there being drownings, and we have the highest drowning statistics in the UK, in Scotland. And you can't draw a cause and correlative effect in relation to learning to swim and school swimming in that respect, or public pools, but there's definitely an impact there that as pools start to close and come under threat and are not replaced, we will see in the years to come, I believe, higher instances of, those statistics will not improve, they will only get worse. In terms of the pools themselves, we have around 295 swimming pool facilities in this country. That's not just pools, because some facilities have more than one space, and those numbers are under threat. We know that the ageing pool stock requires a lot of maintenance and ongoing energy costs. So it's important that we not only maintain and replace and repair these buildings in good order, but we do look at some of that geographical spread. We do understand there's some geographical gaps. Scottish Swimming's published its vision for aquatics, and we also have our facility strategy linked to that, and we know where some of those gaps are, and we do want to work with partners about how we address those gaps and ensure everybody in those local communities has access to what you and I have experienced as children, which is learning to swim. I myself learned to swim at the club, learned to swim, then get transitioned into the local swimming club, worked my way through, not quite to the level of Duncan and Abbey, but certainly, was a reasonable club swimmer, and that stood me in good stead for adulthood. I then taught swimming and coached swimming in adulthood. My mum was a volunteer. It was very much a community activity, and I think that's the other aspect of it, is it is part of cohesion and basically a wider societal piece about creating communities. And swimming pools are very much community assets. They're not just buildings where people come and learn to swim and take part in the activity or compete and perform, but they are actually community hubs in the widest sense.
There's a couple of points that strike me in that comment. Obviously, referring back to my Eastwood constituency, the council-owned swimming pool there is about to be replaced. They've gone with the development of a completely new community infrastructure with pool and theatre, as opposed to, I suppose, in other areas where the asset is just being axed without there really being a programme of replacement. And we'll come to that, and we'll come also to what the consequence of that might be for emerging sports people of the future. But you touched on the fact that we have particularly the highest drowning rate in the UK. In fact, it's almost twice the average of the rest of the UK. And I was interested to know, has that always been the case? Is that a trend that has been deteriorating? Is it a more recently emerging statistic? Were all those deaths avoidable if people had known how to swim, or are we talking in some cases about, really people getting caught up in force majeure, which would have been impossible for them to really have, or at least I suppose if they'd known how to swim, they would have had an opportunity. But I'm interested to understand just where that statistic sits and what maybe potentially underpins it.
Yeah, I think coming to the end piece first, I think there's some accidents are always avoidable. I don't think we can say if somebody could swim or had learned to swim or had water safety skills that necessarily would have made a difference. I don't think that's always possible to say. So there is some element of sometimes these things will happen, and it's an unavoidable consequence of it. I think if people have the opportunity to learn to swim and learn life-saving skills or water safety skills, they've got a better chance of understanding what they might be going into, and therefore it's a bit more avoidable. So I think it's difficult to say there's an absolute correlation to it. I think we could easily say that by equipping people with the skills and the understanding of basic water safety and being able to swim, we'd have a much better chance of reducing that rate. There's also the wider piece in terms of the statistics over time. I don't have those to hand. That's something we can provide. We've only looked at the more recent statistics, which are quite startling. So
those more recent statistics, then, does that represent a deterioration, or is it just that was the statistic when you uncovered it?
That was the statistic when we uncovered it. So
yeah.
we can look those out and we can come back to the committee with those.
Okay. Does anybody else want to come in on this bit, or we? Duncan Scott.
Sweet. Well, firstly, thanks very much for allowing us to speak today. It's an area that I'm hugely passionate in, not only as an athlete and someone that's had my entire life has been devoted to the sport of swimming, and I've learned so many lessons from the sport, and it's a real passion of mine. But then also as the Learn to Swim ambassador as well, it's something that has grown on me, and something that is of a real importance as well. We can't have that Learn to Swim framework, if there's a lack of pools throughout the country. So yeah, as it's already been mentioned, it's a real issue and a challenge within Scotland. You said yourself in your constituency in Eastwood, there's a good ample amount of pools, but from myself, an athlete throughout my career, I look back to some of the pools that have been a part of my journey. Alloa Leisure Bowl, which is now closed, Bowness swimming pool, which is now closed as well. So yeah, it does make me think with my athlete head on, where are these next athletes going to come from? But then when I start to think about my Learn to Swim and Learn to Swim ambassador head on, I've been in that role since 2016, and the Save Our Pools campaign really started to hit home after I visited Broxburn Pool in 2022, getting to see the first-hand impact it was having on a small local community. The children's faces learning to swim, what it was doing, the parents really enjoying to see their kids, what the teachers were doing. It was just, it was great to be there. Later that same year in 2022, that pool was later closed. So I think, from my perspective, it's pool closures. It's going to be a direct correlation between, pool closures and a real struggle for the Learn to Swim framework. Scottish Swimming in 2023 on the future of swimming facilities in Scotland estimated that £40.5 million is needed to maintain the current level of pool provision each year. That would build or refurbish potentially 4 swimming pools a year, but costs are rising, and those figures are already out of date. So for myself, I think there is some good news around the corner. I've Blair Gowrie, potentially a swimming pool there, Curry High School as well, and then in the local area where I grew up in Clackmannanshire, there is speaks in the pipeline of a pool there as well. Actually, also where I swam at Alloa Swimming Club in Clackmannanshire, where the current British swimming head coach is from as well. So there is that real ethos of swimming in Scotland that's starting to take over the British swimming team as well.
In your experience, having visited and been an ambassador in the way that you articulate, is the obstacle to children being given the opportunity to learn how to swim simply the availability of facility, or has there been a regression in the provision of the opportunity through the significantly, it seems, increased costs that have been associated with providing that facility? Because I noticed that we've got a suggestion that that the actual cost has increased like 53% over the last 5 years or so, and has that also proved to be a kind of obstacle to it? So is it a mix of the provision of facility, but something else more fundamentally as well, which is it being seen as an area simply for expenditure reduction?
Yeah, totally. And I think it's just about hitting home that idea of, it is a life skill. We've already touched on the drowning element of it. So yeah, it's the pressure that's been put on through the energy costs of keeping pools alive, and then also the provision as well. So yeah, I think that element of learning to swim and that life skill is of paramount importance. You know, and the Learn to Swim framework manages to put, I think it's 82,000 kids and adults throughout the week, and it's already seen over 100,000 go through the programme. But without pools throughout the UK, these figures aren't going to be possible.
And just finally, before I bring in colleagues, you just referred there to throughout the UK, and you obviously will have an opportunity to understand what's happening elsewhere too. We're talking here about Scotland. That is obviously our concern. It's about the provision of both the opportunity and also the acquisition of a life-saving skill here in Scotland. But is this a trend that is also being felt across the rest of the United Kingdom? Are colleagues of yours who compete similarly concerned about what's happening elsewhere? Or are we somehow in Scotland with a swimming pool estate that maybe is older and more susceptible to closure?
Yeah, I think so. Swim England. So, firstly, yes, I think across British swimming and the team that I'm a part of, there's a large concern of where's that next generation of athletes going to come from, but then also where's that next generation of everyone can swim idea that Scottish swimming has a real focus on. You know, Swim England had a study recently that estimated the lifespan of pools to be 38 years old. Scotland currently has 122 public swimming pools that are over that threshold of 38 years old, which is quite an alarming statistic.
Sounds like our fairy. So, our other two guests like to come in. Derek McGowan.
Yep. So again, thanks for having us along today. So from my perspective, I'm a coach, but in my day job as my career, I'm a school teacher as well. So I've got a vested interest, obviously in the education background of everything that goes on, and I've seen firsthand those knock-on effects and implications. And although we come from that swimming perspective, it's not just about swimmers. There are water polo, there's kayakers, there's scuba divers, there's our emergency services. We cannot have even like the emergency services going learning out in open water and so on. We need those pools to be able to go and train them in the best capacity to be able to go and save those lives as well. So that's a really important fact. One of the, based on the studies and things that have been completed, around 63 to 64% of Scots want to holiday beside water. Now, if we then add that to the statistics that you've heard previously, that's a fair chunk of risk that we have if we don't have everyone learning to swim, never mind just the kids in that future. So I've been coaching swimming probably for the best part of 20 years since being an athlete as well. And I see that first-hand positive impact, but not just to the fun, the fitness, the friendship. It's that social and physical element to it. And we can always bring in the things that are current, especially I've got in education today in the mental health statistics. There is a real drive to improve the mental health of young people so that they are the future of tomorrow. Now, where that's affected me personally is I coach at the Dolan Aqua Centre in East Kilbride. We've just undergone what was to be a short-term closure that took 10 weeks beyond the original planned time that it took. That significantly impacts the mental health of the young people who then need to travel and spend more money to travel to further pools. We've got to negotiate and work as a club to go and negotiate pool time that's already critical with the other clubs that are involved there. So the refurbishment, I get that we need it, the renovation, but if we can do that in a way where we collaborate with people to plan these things out, then I think we take those statistics of the pools that are more than 38 years old and we can develop that we can keep them open. There are methods in how we do that, because there are so many different, and where I want to get across, there's so many different user groups. Although we can come and we can represent from Scottish Swimming, there are so many user groups across the country that it's only when we see fatalities, unfortunately, on the news and things like that, that it hits home how much we need these things.
And Derek, do the majority of young people, when they learn to swim in a swimming pool as opposed to in open water?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the swimming pool is the catalyst.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know if you've been in the water yourself,
the genesis.
and we've got all the the things that say cold water immersion helps improve mental health and so on, for a 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old kid learning to swim, that's not a good experience for them, and we're looking for positive experiences for young people.
No, I was interested when you said the majority of Scots people like to be near water when they're on holiday.
Yep.
Is it not just that we are used to getting wet? Is that not the kind of... It's really... Abby Thompson, would you like to contribute anything at this stage?
Yes, thank you for having us here again today. So the closure of swimming pools and the reduction of opening hours has had an impact on all ages. Learning to swim, of course, being essential as a life skill. Here at Scottish Swimming, we have 23,000 members, volunteers and coaches, 16,000 of those being athletes that swim for their physical and mental health. Of course, mental health is a challenge here in Scotland, as is the rest of the world, with 1 in 4 of us experiencing mental health challenges in our lifetime. As a student PE teacher, I have witnessed this in one of my placement schools, with topics like self-harm and anorexia becoming more talked about, and the rise of mental health issues within young people is becoming more. But physical exercise like swimming can make a huge difference. It did to myself. Having ADHD when I was younger, I really struggled in school with social things, but swimming was my thing. It was my way to channel the energy that I had and channel the focus. It almost became like my superpower. We conducted, JL Partners conducted a survey which came about, and it said 70% of adults swim for mental health, but it also said that they swim for physical in the same 70%. And of course, a lot of people think of swimming as getting up early mornings like Duncan and a lot of other swimmers, but it is social. A lot of people come to the pool for social experiences, whether that's a cup of tea afterwards, whether they're doing fitness. It is a social butterfly, and for some elderly people, it might be their only social interaction in a day.
Okay, thank you. I asked quite a bit. We're developing themes, I think, rather than pursuing specific points. So I should also say we've now been joined by our colleague Maurice Golden. Morning, Maurice. David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. As somebody who could, well, it's younger than the Convener, but somebody who could remember Kirkcaldy Swimming Club was in the harbour, and its numbers were very few until we actually got a pool in Kirkcaldy and I learned to swim. On the benefits of swimming and the health and well-being in the population of Scotland, and I am one who, once sport, football, I was no longer able to do, or physical activity. I've recently got a membership for a swimming club in Kirkcaldy, and I use it 2 or 3 times a week. And as you say, Abby, a number of people there who I now socially interact with. So can somebody expand a wee bit on how that health and well-being of the population of Scotland is affected by it? John.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Convener. I'll maybe just expand a little bit on a survey that was done that both Duncan and Abby have referenced, which is the JL Partners survey, which is a Scottish-based survey. And the headline figure is 95% of Scots agree that swimming pools are important for safety. But it goes further than that. And if you start to unpack that, they're saying that they're important as communities, for communities. So we see that as a community asset. There was 88% positively responded in that respect. They also saw it as an important piece of infrastructure in relation to Scotland as a successful sporting nation. So 87% said that they felt that swimming pools were important with regards to that. 86% said they were important in terms of overall health benefits. And for social interaction, it was 69%. So there are statistics that back up the assertions that swimming pools aren't just about where you learn to swim and do that singular activity. As Derek has said, there's a lot of different activities take place in pools, and our partners in community leisure facilities and local authorities and leisure trusts that run these work really hard to put on really engaged, active programmes and opportunities for children, young people, older adults, those with health issues and long-standing health issues as well. And we know that swimming and aquatic-based activity as non-load-bearing is really helpful for those that are recovering from long-term or even, post-surgery activities to try and get themselves back to normal activity levels again. So they're incredibly beneficial in that wider regard as a health improvement tool and a health benefit tool, notwithstanding some of the things Abby talked about the wider mental health benefits. As people, we're social animals. You know, increasingly in this day and age, we spend a lot of time online. But in swimming pools and community facilities like that, it's the face-to-face interaction that really develops us as people, and it ensures or helps support our mental health and well-being in a broader sense.
Anybody else? Yeah. Duncan?
Yeah, so I mean, did you mentioned you swam 2 to 3 times a week?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, that puts you right in, so I think 13% of adults swim regularly, so it's actually the most participated event or sport, that takes place in Scotland outside of just going to the gym. That was actually 17% before COVID, which just shows you the magnitude of and the scale of the difficulty that saving pools is. You know, everyone is affected. From a personal point of view, from being an athlete and the Learn to Swim ambassador, firstly, from an athlete's point of view, Scotland really does punch above its weight in terms of an international scale. You know, with 21% of Team GB's 2024 Paris team trained in Scotland, and then 5 of the 8 medals won in 2021 in the pool at the Olympics were made in Scotland. They're quite big figures. And now over to the putting my Learn to Swim hat on. The national framework with Scottish Swimming and Scottish Water have that vision of Generation Swim. Now, that whole idea is to have a generation of safe, competent and safe and confident swimmers, who will get the most health and safety benefits from swimming, that whole package. You know, not only the potential of, you know, going on to become a swimmer, but then also, as it's all been mentioned already, the health mentally and physical as well. As it's already been said, you know, over 100,000 have taken part in the Learn to Swim framework, but with pool closures happening, you know, this is an area that we're looking to increase, not start to dampen. And the Save Our Pools campaign is something that's really going to affect the Learn to Swim framework. Athletes at the top end, elderly, injured, everything in all little communities up and down Scotland.
That was going to be my next question about how competitive we are at swimming and how successful as a nation we are. And you mentioned we do punch above our weight for the size of the population that we have. These pool closures and the distances that somebody's already mentioned that people would have to travel to learn to swim or to compete or to train. And I know Kirkcaldy Swimming Club's got a great club. They're training in the Finns and Fife as well, are a good club. These pool closures, will they really restrict the way we could bring athletes forward just because of distances that we'll have to travel on? I think.
I'll just go a small thing on this. So, firstly, from my personal experience, the club that I grew up swimming for has now decided to join together. You know, with financial costs being so high now and pool closures happening. So, Forth Valley Tridents is a brand new club that didn't exist even when I was coming through swimming. Simply because the finances now are so high and the demand is so difficult. With that being said, you know, the travel then is even harsher, making it more challenging for parents to then take their kids to swimming lessons, learning to swim, clubs, even competitions as well, as they're in further locations and more demanding areas throughout the country.
Derek?
Yep, thank you. I'll probably just add to that, because from a South Lanarkshire perspective over the last 3 years, I know we were talking about the rise in costs and the figure of 53% came up. In South Lanarkshire over the last 3 years, now as we've hit the new financial year, we've actually faced a 107% increase in our overall costs for pool hire. They wanted to do that within a 2-week time frame, and we were told in mid-March that it would then go up in April. We fought that, and that's then been staged over 3 years, but we've still had that 107% increase, which is way beyond what you're saying in terms of your 53% increase. We have managed, by working really hard with the young people, the athletes, to keep that travelling time down by keeping it as close as we possibly can and working within our local community to then minimise that. And we've managed to increase our numbers. How we've done that, we can't put an exact measure of how we've managed to achieve that, but I believe it's down to the benefits that swimming has, and I can only take it from an education perspective and in the sense of the transferable skills. I probably wouldn't be sitting here today being able to do what I do as a teacher, as a coach, without some of those skills that I've learned as a youngster through swimming. The confidence, the resilience, and also there's been a study back in 2017 that matches attainment and rising with swimming. And there will be other sports that make it rise too, but I genuinely would pass on, and I know we talk about being up early in the mornings and so on. Those kids are ready to learn. The ones that leave me, we can have 50, 60 kids in the morning. Those ones that leave me at 7:15 in the morning to go to school for 9, they are more ready to learn than the child that gets out of bed at 8:30. So how can we encourage more children to do that? I know the big driver for me, because in my day job, I'm the data officer for South Lanarkshire Council for Education Resources. We keep talking every single day about how do we reduce that attainment gap. This is one method of how we can reduce that attainment gap, if we can really sell that and keep places open and increase the participation as we go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bring in Fergus Ewing, is that possible?
Yes.
Yep. Fergus Ewing.
Yes, thank you, Convener, and I'm sorry that I'm not able to be with you in person today owing to and thank us for all the work that you're doing in your different ways, which is hugely valuable to Scotland. As someone who's even older than the committee, I won't say by what margin, but I did learn to swim 60 years ago. I do feel that the advantages of swimming, as has been explained in different ways by all the panellists, are myriad and immense, affecting just about every area of life: mental health, physical well-being, ability to learn. We've heard that in the evidence. What I wanted to ask was really just one question, and that is, should there not be a statutory duty in Scotland that every child has the opportunity to learn how to swim at school at the appropriate age? And I presume the younger the better, although I would defer to your knowledge about that aspect. And the reason why I'm asking this is very simple. We've already heard about the pressures and costs that local authorities face. These are very real, and they're never going to go away. And it does seem to me that unless there is a very clear legal duty, then we're always going to be floundering around. We'll always face the pressures of pools closing. We'll never achieve what we all want to achieve. And that in order to fund this, there are a whole range of other things which, frankly, I could suggest, but now is not the time to do that, where we could stop spending money and instead spend that money on ensuring that every child in Scotland at least has the opportunity as a right by law to learn how to swim, because it is so important in the ways that the panellists has identified. Now, I don't know if the panellists are able to answer that now, or if they indicate they wish to go away and reflect about that, because it's a big question. And the last thing I would say is there's an election coming up. So this is an opportunity really to make a pitch to all the parties to include such a proposal in their manifesto at the forthcoming election, which some of us may hope to participate in. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr. Ewing, and always an appropriate metaphor with floundering around. But it was a challenge that I think actually the panel are ready to respond to your questions. So I'll ask John Lunn first off if you'd like to agree with you about the suggestion it become a statutory duty.
Thank you. We would wholeheartedly agree. We've been lobbying quite hard, and we have engaged cross-party on this very subject about getting school swimming back on the curriculum and making it compulsory. We've got cross-party support for that. You'll be aware it's been debated in the Chamber. We have colleagues here that have vigorously supported that campaign that we've been undertaking for a long time. We have been going round the different party annual conferences as well to get support, and we believe there is already cross-party support for this. The other piece that links into this...
What is the issue? You have cross-party support, but not cross-party action.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. You put it a bit more politely than I might put it. The way I would phrase it is nobody's written the cheque yet, is really what I would say, because I think there is support for it, and frustratingly we haven't seen that translate. We have done pilots, we've evidenced it, we've got a shovel-ready, to coin a phrase, a shovel-ready proposal that would roll this out. We have an on-ramp to that. We think we could roll this out to every school in the country within 5 years. There's obviously different starting points because there's different provision. We would use the Learn to Swim framework that Duncan's referenced and he strongly advocates for. So we have the mechanisms to do this. We also have the support. We've got 91% of head teachers in school would support this activity as well. Okay. Quite how you would find that within curricular time, I think it's a slightly different question, and one I would put that over to colleagues in education departments. But there is support at that head teacher and that school level for this, and we would absolutely expect to see, or like to see, that become something that's written into statute. It would also align with trying to support and maintain swimming pools, because it would bring activity to them during the day when they tend not to be as busy, to be honest with you. But aligned to that, we would also like to protect those pools as community assets and create a statutory provision for consultation on any closure on pools, much in the same way as it already exists for football pitches and playing fields, for example. That's not to say you wouldn't close pools, but what we're finding, because of the nature of the estate, some of it sits within education and in schools, some of the estate sits in leisure trusts control, and some of it sits in local authority control. So it's very mixed when we get awareness of or knowledge of any pools that are coming under threat. And it's not joined up in terms of, you'll see in some areas where you might have a school, they're looking at a rebuild from an education perspective, and a swimming pool down the road is closing. And why do you not join that up and build a community facility that has swimming pools and other things attached to them, as well as the school getting rebuilt at the same time? So we think a statutory provision for consultation with ourselves and Sport Scotland at an early stage for any pool that was being under consideration for demolition or rebuild or new build or refurbishment would strengthen that. And then the last piece is the answers don't sit with a few people. We would like to see a task force or a group that's a mix of local authorities, trusts, Sport Scotland, Scottish Government and ourselves to look at what is the solution to this. How do we keep the pools open? How do we create universal or better access for people? And what are the sustainable models for swimming pools in the future? Because at the moment it's piecemeal and it's done locally, and the decisions are made locally, which is fine. I'm all for local democracy and local decision making, but we clearly see when these things come under review and come under threat, we get a very animated local community supported with local politicians and national politicians as well that don't want to see these assets disappear. So that would be our suggestions of 3 things that could help.
Mr Ewan, do you have a follow-up to that, or has that answered your question?
Convener, rarely can I have had an answer from any witness that combines such clarity with a completely comprehensive account of what needs to be done. That's perhaps a model for our ministers and governments to emulate. But in all seriousness, I think it's time for the parties to sign the cheque instead of just uttering words on a page.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring in Neil Bibby, who's been with us this morning from the start of this particular panel, because I know this is an area, just the thing we're discussing there just now, that you've touched on in debate within the Chamber.
Yes, thank you, Convener, for the opportunity to join us this morning, and thanks to the committee members for carrying out this inquiry and for the witnesses for their evidence on this. I have raised this on a number of occasions in the Parliament. My own children are learning to swim currently, but that was delayed because of COVID, and I'm very aware of the increase in costs, the reduction in opening hours, which is just making it really difficult for children and young people to access the opportunity to swim. Obviously, there's benefits for people of all ages, but I do want to just focus on, as Fergus Ewan said there, ensuring that every child has the opportunity to learn to swim learn the basics of water safety, and I commend the work the Scottish Swimming are doing and Duncan is doing in terms of that swimming framework. It's clear that we have got a postcode lottery, and if, I guess, to follow on from Fergus Ewan's question, if we do want to ensure that every child has the chance to swim, do you agree that this needs to be a national priority, this needs to be a national mission? And in addition to that, we know previously 40% of children were leaving primary school being able to swim, but when I asked the Minister for Health and Public Health and Sport recently for the latest figures, the Scottish Government weren't able to tell me what the latest figures were. So in addition to making it a national priority and national mission, would you agree that we need national audit? Because to tackle the problem, we need to understand the extent of the problem as well, so we can address that at a national level. I don't know.
I'll give a very quick one. We would see that as part of embedding them to swim. The curriculum is establishing baseline levels of swimming safety skills as well as ability to swim, because that would then let you know what the starting point looks like. And
I'll just add briefly to that. If, obviously, from an education perspective, a curriculum for excellence is continually under review and looking at the potential changes to certain things. So we've got an opportunity at the same time that goes hand in hand to ultimately get that onto the curriculum. And there are methods that, if you explore the framework and how things can be embedded, it's not just a set for primary 5, for example, because we live in such rural communities at times that it's about how do you combine certain year groups that makes it financially viable and possible to do. So it's not a set on the curriculum, it must be at a certain time. So if it could be considered that actually it could be on the curriculum before they leave primary school, great, but then how that happens within the curriculum could be up to head teachers and leaders within local authorities, especially in our rural communities.
Abby.
I have witnessed myself that some leisure facilities haven't actually started up or restarted up their Learn to Swim programmes since COVID. So entire communities of people in possibly vulnerable locations are not getting that essential skill. So for me, swimming should be higher up on the political agenda. Obviously, it's not all about sport, and it's all about sort of being safe and promoting that skill of learning to swim. Obviously, not everyone's going to be like Duncan, but everyone should have the opportunity at least, and we should hopefully get these programmes back up and running. As children get older, we do see the benefits of sport, like Derek said, as well as Generation Swim. We also need a generation of sustainable carbon-efficient pools. It is great to see the new technologies in some of the pools that are being built, like Blair Gowrie and Curry High School, but we need them more sustainable and to keep them from being just for current and future generations. Swimming pools should be protected community assets. Having a statutory requirement for consultation over every pool closure would be a step in the right direction to keeping them open.
Thank you. Mr Bibby, have you got a follow-up you'd want to?
Just no, thank the like Mr Ewan, thank the witnesses for their clear and concise answers. Thank you.
Okay, Maurice Golden.
Thank you, Convener. I was interested in the 38 years lifespan of a pool because in Dundee we can't make 10. The Olympia closed down after 9 years for 2 years and then opened up for 2 months before closing again. But I did walk past it just last week and it was queued out, which is a great sign, I think. I'm interested in the types and size of pools and the sort of groups that they might be able to attract, because all swimming pools are not equal, and you know, you've got your leisure type, some are bolted into more traditional style swimming pools. So I wonder if there's, you know, just some thoughts around that, and to tie that in, is there any geographical gap in provision of certain types of swimming pools? And furthermore, for those pools that are in schools, how are they set up to access the wider community? Because I know when I've tried to access facilities in schools, it's incredibly difficult, and you know, no online, it's back to phoning and things like that. So just maybe take that in a round and different points of view. Who would like to start?
Maybe start on this one. Thank you. And the first point, I think, is when you talked about the different types and sizes of pools. We have just recently released our strategic vision for aquatic facilities in Scotland. I wouldn't call it a facility strategy because we don't have the capital investment. What we want to use that for is a tool to help develop and understand what the local context looks like. It has mapping elements to it, so we can overlay within that what participation and travel distances look like. So this is where we think the early consultation with ourselves would really help that. But we'd want to help partners and work with them so we can help them understand the geography, the travel distances, etc. And then within that, we've categorised pools from national, regional and local facility levels and talked about different types of facilities, whether it's your large facilities like you have here in Edinburgh, which has an Olympic-sized swimming pool, but it also has an adjustable floor. It has a teaching pool next to it that has an adjustable floor. It has a diving tank that has an adjustable floor. So there's flexible models and flexible facilities that can accommodate multitudes of users, and that is really what is, that is what is being built, and that is what's required. It isn't a single type of pool for every single location, and also for every single type of use. The likes of the Commonwealth Pool and the Tollcross Pool in Glasgow have spectating facilities, and they're used for world level events as well as British level events, and Aberdeen Sports Village falls into that category as well. So we do have facilities that are capable of and do host international and world level events, as well as those facilities also being able to accommodate learn to swim, disability groups, those with wider health needs, etc. So we do have that capacity to do that within the strategy, and we are seeing providers looking at those models that work best for those local communities. Coming back to your second piece, just in relation to school pools, it is a mixed bag. We have some good access. It's not universal. I know that there's been a lot of narrative around accessible school estate and it not being the case. In some cases, those facilities are not suitable for wider community access because of the setup, the nature, the access points and the management of that. We understand that. So it can be accommodated, but it needs work. And again, that would just come down to better joined up planning at inception. So when they're getting rebuilt or new schools are getting built and they want to put these facilities in, it needs to be joined up with what the community need might be as well. And head teachers are critical to that part, as well as the education departments. We just need better conversations to join that up and ensure that where the access is available, that we can get it, but also that when these pools are being built in an education environment, that they also consider the wider community benefit and possible use as well.
Thanks.
I think, firstly, I think as I mentioned there, of the Royal Commonwealth Pool, joked about Dundee with 9 years. I think that's 56 years. And it just shows what can be done when that there is a healthy amount of investment, and it has gone under some major refurbishments over the time, but it's one of the busiest aquatic centres in the country, and it's needed for all levels. It hosts international competitions, which I've been a part of for many years. Day-to-day club swimming, learning to swim, diving, all sorts. So it's a really beating heart of Scotland, and it's learned to swim. And 56 years really does speak volumes. I think mainly what I was then going to refer to, you spoke there about school swimming and pool access. Yeah, I would agree there with John in the sense that it's very different. As someone that came through club swimming, I swam a lot in different pools in different schools throughout the Falkirk area. And the access for that is quite difficult. So I think the proposal of that combination with Sport Scotland and learning about when pools are opening, which ones are closing, having that consensus across the board will allow for a more efficient use of pools all across Scotland, and being able to get the most out of the pools that we do have, but then also being able to get the most out of the pools that are potentially opening in different areas as well.
Derek or Abby, if you want to come in on this one.
Yeah, I would probably just add to it in the sense of again, it's the conversations and the things that are possible within, and that we do have a wealth of experience, obviously, within my club. I'll be part of East Kilbride Swimming Club now as a swimmer and a coach now for 31 years come August. So that's been a significant part of my life. And I know from the really strong structure and wealth of experience within my own club, when this goes across the 150-odd clubs in Scotland, that we have some methods, some ways of helping and assisting people to better make use of the facilities. And sometimes we're not listened to and so on, and they don't want to do because they do have those pressures in the background. So it's almost, can you guys help us start up some of those conversations within our areas and our constituencies that helps increase and increases the efficiency? What that then does, it's not going to happen in every area overnight, but what it can do is we can then get some fine examples of where it is working. You know, and I touch on Duncan's point of the international facility at Royal Commonwealth Pool. Sometimes on the Friday when they're setting up before the weekend, they've got the inflatables and different things and other things that make it that fun element, similar to the area at the Olympia in Dundee, that you don't need that specific money spent on that additionality, but you can add to the general pool, the way that we see a traditional swimming pool, and you can have that fun, that social element to it. And that's just about creativity. And I think if we can be creative, there are massive strides that we can make within the whole country.
Yeah, definitely. And as well as that, the facility that I use, so I've swam for 15 years competitively, and now I coach and teach at my local swim club, Kingston. The facility that we primarily use has got 3 pools in it. So it's got a tiny wee teaching pool for the ones that want to learn to swim, a boom pool for those that are developing their skills, and then their main 25-metre pool. Out of all those pools since COVID, only the one has opened up. So actually, it might not even be opening up more pools, but opening up facilities that we currently have. Because these facilities are usable. We need more staff, yeah, but let's try and open up the pools that we have. Because currently I'm still trying to teach little ones with armbands on in the main pool, and it's the same depth the whole way along. We've had to invest in platforms and other things to enable us to do that, but that also takes away from the club swimmers. So instead of having all 6 lanes of swimming, they are now down to 4 because we're teaching in that part of the pool. Instead, we can use all 3. So it's looking at, can we make adaptations and try and open up the facilities fully to what they were prior to COVID.
Golden?
Thank you, panel. That was very comprehensive.
Well, thank you all very much. David, I was actually just about to give you the opportunity to does anybody want to come in with some final questions before I ask if we've not covered anything. Mr. Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. Just around about opening facilities which are closed down. We all know that swimming pools are huge costs, especially running costs, and heating that water is probably the biggest cost that swimming pool or that facility will have. How is it that local authorities, because there's modern technology out there, there's new ways of heating pools or even the energy, how is it that local authorities are not embracing it as quick too, or would these facilities be a lot more viable if they did embrace new technology that's out there to reduce costs?
I'm conscious of time, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Convener. I'll keep
No, that's all right. That's just you can both come in, but I'm just conscious of time.
No, I was just, no, on you go. No.
keep it brief. I think that's probably more a question for our colleagues that are coming later. They'll be more au fait with the technologies and the current developments in that. We would always advocate for investment in sustainable technologies and also looking at how they can make buildings more efficient in terms of that, heating the water in particular. The piece I think I just want to reinforce that we've maybe not covered, if I can, which is just that swimming pools and being able to swim impacts and the reduction in the availability of that impacts on the most needy groups in society in Scotland. We know that for a fact. If we continue to see an erosion of not just the pools, but the provision of Learn to Swim, the access to clubs and community groups and other activities, then it will be the children and those from the most deprived and backgrounds that will be impacted the most. And I think we need to just remember that, as well as all the other factors we've talked about. This really is something that will to me, and the evidence shows, will impact on those groups that need it the most.
Did want to say something side of that?
No. Let's carry on. I don't know. Are we getting one more final?
I'll give you one more final blast when the moment comes, but I see Fergus Ewing has put his hand up again. Fergus, have you got a quick question you want to get before we just come to the final moments of this session? You need to unmute. Yep.
I'm unmuted now, I think.
You are.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. Just a quick question to someone on the panel. If there were to be a statutory right, then would it be the case that there would be more use of pools because more children would be getting taught how to swim than at present? And therefore, there would be additional income coming to pools as a general proposition. And if so, is that a factor which the panellists can help quantify in order to take forward the delivery of a statutory right to learn to swim, on the basis that it would help to bring in additional income, which thereby would help to meet the higher steep costs of running swimming pools? Thank you.
Okay. Anybody want to chip in on that? John again.
Again, I'll keep this one brief. So the Learn to Swim proposal, school swimming proposal that we've put to Scottish Government fleshes out that detail. We know that currently there's around 14,500 children learn to swim in a school setting context. If you take a single year group, there's about 50,000 children in P5. Our proposal would ensure that all those 50,000 get access to those learn to swim and water skills and water safety activities as part of the school curricular time. And that would add, just as Fergus has said, it would add income to those facility providers at times of the day when they tend not to be so busy.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much. I'm going to just, as we get to the end, invite you just to think of any last comment that you might want to contribute or any further thought that perhaps we've not touched upon. Derek McGowan?
Yeah, just finally, thanks for having us today. And I would hope that from anything, what I've seen is that I don't think there's any political party that would disagree with anything we've said. It's how do we be able to work together to make that happen for us?
Well, you're also speaking to a committee that's sometimes referred to as the awkward squad, in as much as we tend, irrespective of the political parties we belong to unanimously be a thorn in the flesh to everybody. John Loon?
Very briefly, I think we've got an opportunity here not just to change lives, but to save lives, and I think we need to lean into that. As Derek has said, there's almost universal support for this, so I think we need to take some positive action, and hopefully we've outlined the steps that the committee feel they can get behind and support.
Thank you. And I'll come to the two who are still competitively swimming for us. Abby?
Swimming for me is a way of life, and I think it's really important that we continue to develop the way of life for others too. So yeah, let's keep swimming the heart of communities.
Thank you. And finally, Duncan Scott.
Well, yeah, I'd like to say, well, thanks again for taking the time to listen. And, you know, I think, firstly, some of the statistics are quite alarming, but then also the various numbers of reasons that pools really are, one, a beating heart of this country, but then also why they're so important as well. You know, as an athlete, you know, I always think it's so special, and I've been very grateful that I've been able to compete at so many different home, as in the UK, competitions, but then also in Scotland as well, hosting European Championships and Commonwealth Games. But it makes me wonder, what will this legacy come to if there's a lack of pools in this country? In England, in 2023, there was 382 pools that have closed since 2010, and as many were nearing the end of their lifespan. And due to this, a swimming pool support fund and specific cross-working group for swimming was set up because of this such vital life skill. So what do we do in Scotland to get the same level of focus and support? Without this, I fear that generation swim idea from Scottish swimming is going to be a generation of cannot swim, and our drowning figures are only going to worsen. So I think having a joint government task force with the Scottish Government and COSLA to assess the investment needs for pools would be a great outcome. And I'd like to thank you all again for taking the time today.
Well, thank you very much. That's a very important note and thoughtful note on which for us to end this particular roundtable, and I will now briefly suspend to allow a change in our witnesses. Thank you. Okay, so welcome back to this meeting of the Citizens Participation and Public Petitions Committee. We've just concluded our first roundtable, and we now have our second roundtable discussion on petition number 2018 to recognise the value of swimming pools and provide financial relief to help keep pools open. And we've now been joined by Dan Breen, who's Coached Programmes Manager of Sport Aberdeen, Kirsty Doig, Director at the Darcy Sunshine Project, Julian Gibson, the Policy Manager for Sport and Physical Activity, Gillian Gibson, Policy Manager for Sport and Physical Activity at COSLA, and Ben Lamb, Chief Executive of West Lothian Leisure, also known as Excite. A warm welcome to you all. If you're all content to do so, we'll move straight into questioning, and hopefully gives you an opportunity to use the answer to any question to articulate any particular view that you might have in addition. I'm going to invite my colleague Maurice Golden to open the questioning in this particular session.
Thank you, Convener, and a welcome panel. As we heard from the previous evidence session regarding the types and sizes of swimming pools and how that attracts different cohorts in society, I was just wondering from your experience how that provision is met in your specific area, if there's any gaps, and specifically if there's any thoughts on access to particularly school swimming pools as well, and what your first-hand experiences of that. Who would like to start? Right, Ben?
Yeah, thank you, and echoed, as everyone else said, I suppose, thanks for the opportunity to come and talk about this such a important subject. So I suppose just starting at the back end of the question there. So I'm Chief Exec at West Lothian Leisure, so we're a charity, a leisure trust and a not-for-profit operating facilities on behalf of the council. That was referenced earlier as different models with local authorities and trusts and different operators. So we currently offer community access to 9 schools across West Lothian, so we've got a good experience of what that looks like. And I think as the guys and John touched upon it earlier, there's very different access levels depending on the school buildings and the facilities. And how that kind of plays out to allow you to drive participation through the school estate. What we've managed to do, and I'll maybe touch upon it a little bit once we've gone through the opening bit, but we unfortunately were in a position 18 months ago, we actually closed 3 swimming pools, and it was the school estate that we used to move and migrate some of our programmes to make sure that we can continue to drive participation. So maybe a good example that I could give around the schools facilities. The West Lothian Council, in partnership with West Lothian Leisure, opened up the Winchborough Sport and Wellbeing Hub in West Lothian in 2022, and there was investment in there into a new build facility where access was set up for the community, and we have a significant amount of usage that now goes into those facilities, whereas some of the other schools that have been there for a number of years, access isn't possible at all times because of the swimming pool maybe at the back of the school and it isn't set up for public access. So there's a different array of schools in the way that they're set up, but that access and using those schools facilities I think is a really important piece in this whole conversation. As you mentioned, there's different facilities. Yes, there's the regional, yes, there's the national, but sometimes just access to water space within a school, it might be a 20 metre or 25 metre by 4-lane swimming pool. It provides opportunities for, John mentioned it earlier, intergenerational, so much different usage within the school. But of course there are challenges around access to that, but it gives a bit of an insight into the different facilities that are available.
Thanks.
Come in. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here. So I can't speak to the school estate access across the entirety of the country, and I think you've heard from Ben and the previous panel that is different across different local authorities, and within a local authority different schools have different access needs and the combination of children in a school along with public access. But what I will say is the commitment that we've got a new infrastructure within our new governance within COSLA around sport and physical activity, and our new sport and physical activity special interest group has access to facilities as it's one of its key themes around the whole sport and leisure estate. And as part of that work, we are exploring how to support local authorities to work together and to understand how to learn from each other about accessing the school estate for broader sport and physical activity, of which swimming is an enormous part of that, as you've heard from the petitioners and the panel members previously. So we are trying to support those conversations. Alongside that, Sport Scotland are undertaking an estates review at the moment to look at the infrastructure around the sporting estate in Scotland, of which pools are included within that, along with the access to all sports facilities, but including community access for school pools. So while I don't have that information at the moment, I'm happy to try and gather additional information about the sort of levels of community access for school pools, because it is an answer to a problem that we have, as Ben has alluded to. We are committed within COSLA and working with Sport Scotland on what does that estate look like at the moment, and how do we support and enable as great a use as we can of the estate that we do have, and Abby kind of alluded to that in our last session as well.
Thanks. Yeah.
Diane.
Yeah, like Ben said, we unfortunately had a couple of pool closures over the last couple of years. Hopefully I can speak a little bit more on that in further questions. But we looked at the school estate, obviously when we hadn't got that pool access, worked up agreements with the City Council to get that. So we were able to use underutilised school estate to minimise the impact. It didn't get rid of that impact at all, but it minimised the impact. We moved some of our Learn to Swim programmes and some of our club programmes across But we've got a real mix. We've got 6 pools that we operate. 4 of them are school pools, 2 pools that we solely kind of run. A couple there that the council, through those closures, have allowed us good access to. We've got really good sort of agreements in place. A couple that, well, there's one in particular that sits empty sort of 4 till 6 p.m. at night. And we can't get access just because of the design of the venue. There's still school activity going off within it, so they won't allow us in to use that pool. So there is a real mix. But I think we've moved, I say, with those 2 pool closures, we have used up a lot of that capacity, you know, and we are working well and working closely to use as much of that school estate as we can. But it is a bit of a piecemeal picture.
And Christy, if you would like to contribute at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, I reiterate our thanks and having the opportunity to engage with you today. You know, 5.5 years ago, I would not have expected to be sitting here having this discussion. But in 2020, I lost my daughter to drowning. Hence the start of our organisation, very much specifically looking at making sure that all children have equitable access to at least basic swim skills, which is what's brought me to the conversation today. When we talk about different sizes of pools, what we're really looking forward for is safe, warm bodies of water where children can learn to really embed the water safety education that we're trying to convey to them, and embed those skills for a safer future for them. Which is why it's really important that when we're talking about maintaining the pools that we have and looking at creating this new infrastructure with new schools that we're building, that we do have that really at the forefront of our minds, ensuring that we are ensuring that safety for all children.
Thank you. Maurice Golden.
Thanks for that. Now, in terms of facilities and attempting to keep them open, I'm presuming that in large part that is down to funding, either from the Scottish Government or via councils themselves. If not, flag. But given that, and we've talked about, in essence, maximising the assets that are already there as a way of not requiring extra funding for a facility, particularly around schools, but there could be in certain parts of the country universities that have pools as well. On that kind of either maximising the assets or income generation, is there any innovative examples out there that might allow, you know, either facilities to keep open through you know different practices that you might be aware of? Ben.
Thank you. So just on your point around funding, typically that is the model across the sector. So local authority funding for leisure trusts, or directly putting funding into their own swimming pools when they manage it in-house. The model varies, but particularly across the trust sector in Scotland, the income generation element is quite high. So if I give you an example of West Lothian Leisure, nearly 90% of the income that we generate and use to run our swimming pools and our sports facilities comes from customers, so it comes from what we call earned income, and the 10% of that at the moment comes from the local authority, which makes up the shortfall of funding. Historically, it was a lot higher than that, and over the pressures over the years, that's come down, and that's what others are facing across the sector. So slightly different in terms of percentages, but I think it's really important to make the point that particularly across the Leisure Trust, there's been a strong drive for a number of years to have flexibility in programming to drive the revenues, make maximum use of space, and trying to find that balance between providing affordable and accessible access for the community, but also trying to make sure the revenue is coming in to support the operation of the facilities. In terms of innovations and models that are out there that have allowed trusts and other operators to generate income, what you find across the sector is there's a real cross-subsidy model. So where you're operating in a larger leisure centre that might have a gym or might have a studio, might have sports pitches that accompany the swimming pool and other facilities, that's where the large part of the income comes from. And certainly in our example, that subsidises the operation of the swimming pools. And I'm sure it was in some of the evidence and submissions, but maybe just to help quantify it, the cost of running a swimming pool at the moment, and certainly our experience, per hour is between £100 and £200, the cost to operate that pool. And that obviously varies depending, you quite rightly mentioned, the different type and the different size of the swimming pool. Where you have a larger swimming pool that might have flumes, it might have wave machines, it might have different configuration. Typically, you need more lifeguards, more members of staff to make sure the pool is safe. You need more cost to operate the pool. So there's a sliding scale and how it varies. But, sorry.
£200 then is not just the warming of the water and everything else. You're talking about everything involved in maintaining it.
Correct, to maintain the pool.
Staffing costs, everything.
It's the energy costs, it's the staffing costs, it's the chemical costs, it's everything that goes with that. And typically, and as the guys mentioned on the earlier panel, that flexibility and programming and using that space that Diane up at Sport Aberdeen are some great examples of as well, that we do, is trying to use that swimming pool and tank it as much as possible. We heard earlier that there's canoeing that happens, there's children's swimming lessons, there's aquafit classes, there's a whole range of people from the community, and it's about trying to maximise the use of that space. That over the last couple of years has become harder and harder to do, because while the spaces are maximised, the cost is still significant, and our whole role within what we offer, our whole raison d'etre is in the leisure trust sector, is to provide affordable and accessible access, and it's that cost per hour and the cost per head. So again, maybe just to give you a bit of an example, across our estate, the cost to us per visit of an individual coming in every time they visit is just shy of £5. And at the moment, we, as a leisure trust, we subsidise that by about 81p. So as I said, there's a small amount we still subsidise using the management fee that we get from the local authority. When you move to a standalone swimming pool, that cost per visit increases. So some of our standalone pools, it's up over at £6.50. So because of the costs that are so high, and actually the programming is almost at capacity. So just to give you a bit of an idea of some of the challenges in there at trying to offset the costs that we're facing at the moment.
Thanks, that's very useful. Diane?
Yeah, about the reasons for the closures. Yeah, exactly as Ben said. It's that reduction in the increase in energy costs, the reduction in core funding. We've had a 40% reduction in core funding since Sport Aberdeen came into existence, and that's not even taking into account any of the increases in day-to-day costs and all that side of it. So it's hugely significant. So we've lost two pools over that period. I think before we closed Bucksburn Pool, we had nearly a 700,000 reduction in our core funding that year. So there's those challenges. With regard to looking at innovative solutions, again, sort of following on from Ben, one of our venues, which was a pool standalone, was closed and refurbed to include a gym and fitness suite, include NHS space, try and make it a real community hub, and it's been a huge success. You know, since it's been reopened a couple of years now, and we've had pain clinics there in partnership with the NHS, and really sort of trying to work to make that real community hub. So that's been, you know, hugely successful. And we've moved into sort of more sort of the water wellbeing programs as well, sort of really introduce classes like Good Boost to support adults rehabilitating through injury and diagnosis. So just diversifying the programs to make sure that we're offering those sort of really sort of health initiatives that really sort of support the NHS, support those programs, increasing the disability sort of programs as well, the sort of the pathways we've got there. So it's really sort of trying to diversify that programming rather than just those core standard sort of offering of Learn to Swim, which is absolutely vital and crucial for that income generation that we do, but making sure that we're serving that whole community. So that's sort of been our approach to try and sort of make sure we're really sort of making those programs sort of we're reducing the cost to the NHS. I don't know, if we weren't running some of the programs that we're doing, there would be a significant extra cost, and it's trying to then evidence that we're trying to do, trying to sort of really sort of find that evidence to show through the case studies that we're kind of working on.
Okay, thank you. Kirsty.
Yeah. I think, we're talking a lot about the increasing financial output from our swimming pools, but that is being transferred onto our families and children through the increase by 53% in the last 5 years in real terms in the cost of swimming lessons. You know, we heard earlier that actually in some areas that went up by over 100% in the past 3 years, which you can manage, and you know does put a massive financial burden, particularly for those children from the most low affluence families. There was, you know, a recent study done where a staggering 63% of children in 2023 couldn't even pass the basic water competency test in East Lothian. This is a fairly affluent area, and yet, in higher SIMD situations, this is even worse. So, if we are going to give children equitable access and a fighting chance to survive in, on, and around the water, then we really do need to make sure that it's equitable through school swimming for all. This in turn will help those families who haven't had access to such education be able to use their community pools as a hub, and in turn increasing the income to each of those pools when they become a more thriving community with everyone with the basic skills to actually be able to use them.
Gillian, do you want to come in?
I don't really have anything to add.
Okay.
I think in terms of the innovation, the local innovation, Ben and Diane have covered that perfectly. You will find those examples times 32 of innovating for communities, but innovating to generate income to try and reduce some of that impact that Kirsty has mentioned, because costs are rising, and every leisure trust and every local authority will do whatever it is they can to reduce and mitigate the impact of those rising energy costs, staff costs, whatever else those pressures might be, and try and find that balance. But there has been no one perfect solution found with the the fiscal landscape that we find ourselves in. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to bring in David Torrance to take us forward, but I think he would like to just start by following up on the particular area we've just been discussing. David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning to panel members. Around costs, and you were saying that between £100 to £200 an hour to run a swimming pool, and the biggest cost will be in energy there, whether it's heating the building, heating the water, lighting, whatever. How do local authorities or trusts embrace new technology? There's technology out there that could reduce energy costs greatly and probably make pools far more viable. So how do... Because from what I could see from even the local authority that I'm in, they're not very good at bringing new technology on board.
Come in there, David. Thank you. I think it's a great question, really pertinent point, and it certainly resonated with me when it was mentioned earlier. I suppose over the years, certainly from a West Lothian leisure point of view, and I know wider colleagues across the trust sector, we've been very good at putting in the kind of low-cost interventions, such as reducing pool temperatures. Everyone's got covers that goes on the pools, LED lighting, certain adjustments in the plant rooms. The difficulty and challenge around the high-impact interventions and the more innovative solutions, if I can say it, is a cost point of view, and there's significant costs, particularly in buildings mentioned earlier that are 30, 38 years, I think was mentioned. Across the estate, retrofitting some of these can be challenging and it can be difficult. It absolutely can be done, but there is a significant cost that operators like ourselves and local authorities just don't have the money to do that at the moment, and that's the challenge. And it's interesting when we're talking earlier around the question around statutory provision for swimming, so every child can learn to swim and have access to pool. I don't think anyone would disagree with that, but what comes with that as well is making sure that the facilities are sustainable in the future. So there's the ongoing revenue costs and the deficits that they cost to operate on an ongoing basis. The income doesn't match the cost, so there's a deficit there. But also, as you mentioned there, David, there's the future capital and investment costs. And if I can just give you one example, which hopefully just tries to clarify it from everyone is different, but from a local point of view, one of our swimming pools has a condition survey capital maintenance cost over the next 10 years of in excess of £1 million. We have in our annual budgets for that particular swimming pool less than 25% of that cost. So we know we're faced with a real challenge, and at the moment, like many I'm sure, we as a leisure trust and as a local authority, we're struggling to invest in life cycle costs to maintain the buildings, and as a consequence of that, the lifespan of the building becomes a little bit shorter as well. So I suppose it's what I'm trying to share there is just as a bit of a perfect storm of all of these things that make it make it very, very difficult. And the point that Kirsty made there as well is around affordable and accessible access and prices increasing. I know across the leisure trust sector and the local authority sector, everyone has a concessionary scheme in place, and I know in West Lothian we are working really, really, really hard to make sure we can continue to provide that discounted access to those that need it the most. But it won't surprise you to know it's becoming harder and harder to do that. Our staffing costs have gone up with national insurance and everything else that that everyone will be aware of as well. So that's the real challenge, is how do we make sure that we have the financial support, but there's a financial support for a number of areas. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of my take on the investments and the capital side of things.
No, thank you for that. Committee has heard that 40% of children in Scotland leave primary school unable to swim. What are the current provision of swimming lessons for primary age pupils, and how is this provision decided? Gillian.
Can I come in? I want to address your last point before please. I go into the next point, just actually to give a wider, more holistic picture. And Ben painted the West Lothian picture really well in terms of how do local authorities, local public leisure innovate for the future to be sustainable. And Ben mentioned the situation in one pool. So in terms of, and it'll be no surprise you've heard the cost pressures that local government face from COSLA on a number of occasions, so it'll be no surprise to bring that to the table. But when you look at the cost to innovate in terms of pools, and you look at the available money to be able to do that. So in the 25-26 budget, there was £40 million additional capital put into the local government budget settlement. That's an £11 million increase in the core capital budget after the cut from 24-25 is reversed. So to put that into context, that means local government has £777 million capital to support £55 billion worth of assets. So when you look at innovating, when you look at that cost or that total amount to cover its entire estate, and you look at the cost that, you know, just in West Lothian and times that by 32, the cost of managing and sustaining what is already there, as well as innovating for the future. The case for swimming and the case for swimming and pool safety, water safety is already made completely. There is very little disagreement. There's cross-party support for it. But the conversation about how we manage the future needs to be a holistic conversation in the context of the rest of the capital assets for sport and not for sport that happen in the country. So I think that's an important context to understand, is the capital money that is available to the entirety of local government to continue to innovate and sustain. I know Diane wanted to come in, so I can come back on your second question.
Diane.
Yeah, you talked about the Learn to Swim provision. So yeah, we have our community programmes that follow the Scottish Swimming Pathway. So there's 6,000 odd children that benefit from that on a weekly basis in Aberdeen. But we do have a school swimming programme that we deliver as well. And as Ben said, the pressures on finance, though, year on year, that is under pressure. It's always one of the things that's looked at as our budgets get reduced, as whether we can still deliver it. We do. So all our P4, all our P4 swimmers in Aberdeen City, which is about 2,200, get a block of 10 swimming lessons per year. The stats around it are quite frightening, though, when you see the swimmers as they come in. So there's 8 and 9-year-olds, the number that haven't actually been in a pool before, the number of absolute beginners in that, so the ones, and it is generally in those regen areas, the areas that are, don't have the finance maybe to come into the community Learn to Swim programmes. So the schools in the sort of the regen areas, sort of 90 to 100% of those swimmers as they come into the P4 swimming lesson programme are absolute beginners. They haven't been, they haven't had any swimming lessons before.
What percentage applied to what? Did you say to whom?
To the swimmers that are coming into the P4 swimming lessons that are in the most deprived areas. Right. okay, on average, it's about 70–75% of our swimmers coming in are total beginners, but the ones that are coming from the poorer areas, it's 90 to 100% that are absolute beginners that we're seeing that are coming in. So we give them that 10 weeks of swimming lessons. But like I say, that budget is constantly under threat. You know,
Craigie.
Thank you. If I can just come in there on Diane's point, just to echo that, actually, it's very similar figures to West Lothian with the P5s that had assessment through our school swimming programme last year. Just over 1,000 children were assessed, and 69% of those, so just over 750 of those, were identified as weak swimmers and beginners as well. So I suppose it just highlights that you can probably times that by 32 and extrapolate that across the region, and it will give you an idea of the challenge.
Kirsty?
I think that although many local authorities are delivering school swimming without it being a statutory mandatory requirement within curriculum, it remains very variable. So what's being delivered in one local authority certainly doesn't match what's being delivered in other, and that very much comes down to facilities, staffing and training as well. There are around 6 local authorities who still don't offer any primary school swimming whatsoever. And I think that although some people may believe that if children don't learn to swim in primary school, that they may well learn in senior or later in life, the reality of that just isn't the case. You know, as children are growing older, there are certain self-consciousness. You know, there becomes a shame around not being able to swim, and all that, particularly at a time where risk-taking behaviour becomes more prevalent as well. So really, getting children in the water and swimming in primary school has been found to be the absolute best age to do that. We found this, a lot of the work that we do at our Sunshine Foundation is primarily based in South Africa, where we're dealing with generations of non-swimmers through financial, social and cultural barriers that have existed there. And through bringing those basic swim skills into the children's lives early, they're taking it back into their families and actually building this safety culture from the foundation level right the way up through their communities. Just by introducing these skills early and getting them embedded early before children are getting to the age where risk-taking behaviour or, more independent activities taking place.
Gillian.
Thank you. And Kirsty and Ben and Diane have really highlighted the local and the national challenge, and I don't think you would find a head teacher in Scotland that wants to cut school swimming, but the logistical reality, the cost of transport to get to and from a pool. If the secondary school in a community has a pool, and not every secondary school, whether brand new or 50 years old in Scotland, has a swimming pool, you look at our rural communities and the cost, and then the time pressure on education, just on the classroom teacher's time to be able to get the child and a group of children to and from a swimming pool, along with the cost of the lessons and the cost of the sort of holistic cost of the swimming, along with the transport and the time, that with the rest of the pressures on education, it's a real challenge. It doesn't mean it's a challenge not to be solved. I absolutely would not counter anything that any panel member has said, but I think the challenge around the fact that it is not a statutory duty, and the cost pressures on local authorities, and then the educational pressure in a school environment, means it's a really difficult but needed conversation to have. But when I reached out to some local authorities for their views and their sort of situation around school swimming, it is not just the cost of swimming, it's the availability of swimming teachers, it's the cost to train swimming teachers, it's the cost and the availability of lifeguards, and the recruitment and retention of that workforce has really been impacted by COVID. Typically a young workforce who have, through COVID, found other employment in other areas of opportunity. So the school swimming, while necessary, as other panel members have said, it's serendipitous of here. I've been involved in swimming my entire life. That's nothing to do with my job. I have, so that case, and that personal case for me, absolutely. But the need for a holistic conversation about school swimming, it is not a decision taken lightly. But we have a really diverse geography in Scotland, as you all understand, and the time and cost pressures to get to and from a pool are underestimated in the conversation about simply providing school swimming lessons in the school day.
Can I just say, as somebody who represents an area, has some of the highest areas of deprivation in Scotland, I'm a bit taken aback by the figures that you gave there, Diane, about 100% of the children coming to these classes are first-time swimmers. So to me, it just highlights how important it is for children to learn to swim at primary school. Can I say, around funding for it, how could the Scottish Government help with that? To ensure at primary school, and I'm part of the government, so I'm here asking how can we help to ensure every primary school kid learns to swim? Because it's so important, because in these areas of deprivation, health and well-being is very, very low as well. So if we could increase that through sport and activity, it helps us.
Yeah, I think John made a really good clear case around what Scottish Swimming's ask are around that. And I think that open conversation across local government, across Scottish Government, with Scottish Swimming, with our leisure trusts, with the entirety of the sector, to understand what is the solution and what is it going to take for that solution to be realised. Swimming doesn't sit in isolation to the rest of the public leisure estate. So, you know, Scottish Government, and they launched it at COSLA, the new Physical Activity for Health framework, makes an absolute case about the importance of physical activity. Education through active places of learning is included in that. And I think that's the impetus. That makes the case for physical activity. It makes the case for that 8 investments in the 8 outcomes that work for being physically active, of which the case has been made very clearly for swimming. Kirsty's absolutely right. As a former swimming teacher, you're not going to easily teach a 12-year-old how to swim in a secondary school swimming lesson. So I think the cross-party support is welcomed. I think the cross-sector conversation about the realities of understanding the financial implications of school swimming doesn't just sit with, let's give the money for the lessons. It's, does the infrastructure sit there? Does the transport sit there? Do we have teachers? Do we have pools that are fit for the future? So that sort of cross-sector conversation with cross-party support, I don't have that figure, but I think to be innovative in the approach, it is starting by working together from the very outset to understand that.
Thank you. Kirsty?
Yeah, just to reiterate exactly what Gillian said, you know, the importance of a joint task force really to look at where we move forward with this. Scottish Swimming's done the work. The pilots have been put in place. They've proven the impact that school swimming can have within the areas that they've done and worked the pilot, which was hugely impactful. It's the action we need now. It's the funding, and it's to make it a priority. You know, as soon as that is a priority, the funding is there. It's ready to go. It's ready. The teams are there and ready to look at that and move it forward. It's the backing that it needs now.
I'm intrigued, actually, because, I mean, you were talking there about Gillian, about the kind of associated transport costs and other things. You know, we do recognise that here because we want to try and access as many primary schools coming to the Scottish Parliament as possible, and actually discover that the issue, in many cases, is the distance from the Scottish Parliament, the costs that are involved in getting here, getting back, that fitting into the timetable of the school day, because parents want to pick their children up at a particular time, and all of that. And yet, on the other hand, I equally was taken aback by the statistic of 3/4 of all children and nearly 100% in deprived areas first experience of water.
Sorry, no, it wasn't that it's the first experience of water, that they are beginners, and some of them it's their first experience of water.
Right, beginners.
Yeah,
Is through school. It is through that school lesson. And I suppose I'm just intrigued, because we haven't touched on this, is where this, do you have any understanding of where this sits within parental priorities, the ability to swim? I mean, is there a real parental understanding of the importance of it and desire to see it happen? Or has there been something of a, well, it's something that also happens, but maybe not with the same impetus to try and get behind ensuring that it does? Gillian?
So I can't speak for all parents. I'm not a parent, but somebody who's worked in local government for 20 odd years and worked in some of Scotland's most deprived communities. When you look at if you are in one of an area of deprivation and you are a family that lives in poverty or the edges of poverty, and you have to make difficult choices every single day for your family, for your children, then for conversations, but anecdotally, what you can probably understand the priority in getting your children to a swimming lesson that you may or not be able to afford without a vehicle, and that might require one or more bus to get to the local swimming pool. Yes, the child might be able to access that transport for free at the moment, but the parent perhaps doesn't. So where it sits on the list of priorities, that old adage we've heard over the last few years, certainly post-COVID, of heating and eating, where does swimming sit on your priority list? And that's not because it's not important and parents and families don't understand it's important. It is.
That's the bit I'm actually trying to understand. I mean, I get what you're saying about the pressures that there are in terms of family budgets and in areas of deprivation. You know, the scale of that is all the more intense. What I'm trying to understand is it the budgetary aspect of it, or is there less of an appreciation of how important it is amongst parents as well that maybe needs to be worked on, or is that level of understanding of the importance of it actually very high? I'm curious.
I think it's both, but those who work closer with communities are probably better.
Kirsty?
Yeah, so one of the initiatives that we run at the Our Sunshine Foundation is that we're offering bursaries for local authorities that don't currently offer school swimming to try and remove the financial barriers to swimming. We know there are other barriers, there are cultural barriers, there are other barriers that we need to try and break down. But specifically from the financial side of it, through offering bursaries, now there are parents that have written in applying for bursaries. I'll give one example of a lovely mum who was passionate about trying to get her children swimming. She had 3 children under the age of 8 and she was a widow. And there was absolutely no way that she was able to take those children swimming herself, because she can't take more than one child into a pool if they're not a competent swimmer. And she wasn't able to afford lessons, so there was just no opportunity whatsoever for this woman to be able to get her children even with basic swim skills. So that, again, removing some barriers and the ones that we understand, the financial ones, and looking and exploring what other barriers there are right now for parents. And a big part of that is water safety education as well. You know, we're talking a lot about swimming today, but it's the understanding of water safety behind that. And a big part of that is being able to be a competent swimmer, to be competent in the water and have an understanding. So again, Water Safety Scotland are working hard to educate all people around all water-based activity, and part of that is educating parents as well.
Was this somewhere where the Darcy Sunshine Project was able to intervene and assist? Is that
Yeah.
Yeah. And Darcy was your daughter?
Yes, she was.
Ben.
Thank you, convener, and then I'll let Diane come in. I suppose really just to echo some of the points around the question around priorities or financial. I think it's a combination of both. But what I think is quite interesting when we look from a local point of view, the number of users that use our facilities in West Lothian from the lowest index of deprivation, so SIMD 1 and 2, is very, very minimal. And I suspect, without having any figures to support it, if you looked wider across other local authority areas, it would be very, very similar. And that's a combination of things. It will be cultural, it will be economic, it will be societal as well. So I think there's a particular challenge which is very, very difficult. Those hard-to-reach groups and those barriers to participation, I think, are evident more than ever now. And the challenge is how to, as you guys have articulated, how to change that picture in that landscape. Sorry, Diane, I came in ahead of you.
Diane.
We introduced a new initiative this last year, so on the back of the school swimming 10-week block, that any of the children, the swimmers, could get a free month in our community Learn to Swim programmes. So reducing that financial barrier, certainly for a month, and see how they go. I think there was 20% take-up we got from that. So I suppose that tells you that, you know, they're the parents that maybe finance was the barrier for, and the rest, there's maybe other barriers, whether it's time, whether it's transport, whether it's opportunity. that's our experience of how we've found it.
Well, thank you all again. I think that's been very, very helpful to us. Is there anything we've not touched on? I'll just go round, and if there's any last point you'd like to make, then please do. And Diana, we'll start with you. Is there anything further you'd just like us to leave us with the thought in our mind?
I suppose I was just going to emphasise, I think I touched on before, the health and wellbeing sort of programmes that we do, and that's something that, I think trusts and local pools, pool programming is really sort of moving towards that, sort of helping that sort of. So our Good Boost programme, sort of anyone with sort of injuries or conditions, and so I think 70% of the people participating in our Good Boost programmes have got an injury or diagnosis. And I think it's about 16% of them are unable to work. So we're really, so by those programmes that we know that trusts are now offering, we're really trying to sort of work on getting those inactive people, those people. So there's the health benefits, the benefits to the country as a wider offer than just that swimming impact. As 45% of those participants are coming through GP referrals. So there, that's that pathway that we're really sort of trying to be that medicine, that future medicine, providing those that pathway sort of away. We've got one participant, and I could list hundreds of them that we've got. An ex-soldier in his 50s, developed vasculitis about 6 years ago, which has permanently sort of damaged his nerve endings, no feeling in his lower legs, balance issues and that. So he started coming to our, the Good Boost programmes. And now he said, he's lost 10 stone in weight. So again, that's helping that obesity. So it's just showing the wider benefits, around that, the swimming offer. And some of the quotes he said, 3 days without it, he could hardly move. He was in a really bad place. Now coming in, it's amazing. Huge difference. It's a social thing too. Can speak to the people that are experiencing similar issues. So it's really sort of, I think we need to find a way to get the messaging out there of how. How these programmes are having an impact, and what would the NHS, what would be the impact on the NHS if we weren't running and delivering these programmes. So they're hard to quantify, but I think that it's really vital that we get that messaging out there, that we're not, we're not just about, here's a pool, just come and look at it. We actually are having a big impact on that NHS agenda. We're providing that complementary support.
Thank you very much. Ben?
Thank you. Well, firstly, thank you for the opportunity to come and raise some of these points. Really enjoyed the discussion. I think I won't reiterate what Diane said, but the impact on people's lives from leisure facilities, swimming pools, sport is evident. Everyone's aware of that, and we know that. I suppose my closing remarks are probably a bit of an ask. I think what you've heard today is there clearly needs to be greater investment, and I think we need to see it as that. It must be looked at and considered as an investment, not a cost, whether we're talking about new technologies or whether we're talking about infrastructure, whether we're talking about school swimming. And this is an ask that Scottish Women and Sport Scotland have articulated very well as well, that there needs to be a long-term sustainable plan for this investment, and there's mechanisms and support in place, I believe, to do that. It's not just about asking for money, it's asking for that smarter investment and a different way of doing things, because quite frankly, without it, I think further closures are inevitable.
Yes, I rather took that from Gillian's earlier statement. I'll come to you now, Gillian, but I did kind of feel that you were, I'm not saying amused, you were grateful for the support of all the political parties, but actually, unless something happens, then the immediate prognosis ahead could be one of reversal rather than progress, and that is something we have to be realistically alert to when we're considering this. But Gillian, your final thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. And echoing others, thanks for the opportunity today. I think not to repeat what anybody else has said, my plea would be around the holistic nature of the conversation about public leisure. So you'll have heard a lot, the wider fiscal challenges that the public sector faces. Diane makes an excellent point that we forget all too often is around early intervention and prevention, and not just the saving of money to the NHS, but the saving of money to many parts of the public sector in the provision of public leisure. And there are very few standalone pools in Scotland, whether that is that they're not part of a wider leisure centre or part of a school, is that we really do have to place value on public leisure, on people's lives, of which pools, and you've heard that argument today around water safety, about swimming for life, about physical activity, about rehabilitation. That is what public leisure does. And we really need to, while I don't disagree with anyone's comments about school swimming and water safety, they are all well made. I think the cross-sector, cross-party discussion about public leisure is a really important one to have at a time when they are discretionary services in local authorities who are under increasing pressure in their statutory services. So there's conversations, as you mentioned, convener, about inevitable future closures. Those conversations will continue to happen while there is increasing pressure on statutory services, leaving less money for. I don't like the term discretionary, because I don't think anyone would agree that leisure facilities should be discretionary, but that is the provision at the moment. So a wider conversation.
Yeah, and our colleague Liz Smith actually has a members' bill before the Parliament just now, which is about a right to outdoor learning in the general sense, which of course this in part could be related to. And finally, since your daughter Darcy is at the heart of all that we've been discussing this morning, I suppose, Kirsty Doing.
Thank you. Yeah. We've discussed so much today, and thank you again for giving us the opportunity to come and engage with you in such an important topic. Swimming pools really are critical community hubs for, as we've learned today, vital life skills for safety, health and well-being, as well as fitness, fun and friendships too. And for this reason, they really do need to be protected as essential community assets. And again, we urge you to make sure that there is a consultation process for every pool closure put in place. Again, our pools are essential. They're safe learning spaces for essential life skills, and they must be protected. To close pools today may offer a short-term win, but will surely earn in much more long-term loss, as I've experienced, as we've been outlined today. So thank you very much.
And thank you all very much. We very much appreciate your participation here this morning. It's been a fascinating morning, I think, for us just to be able to give this issue the kind of attention that I think it deserves, but to hear from two panels of really very high-quality witnesses. So thank you all very much, and I'll suspend now briefly just before we proceed with the next agenda item. Thank you. So, welcome back. I'm going to just seek to facilitate my colleagues who are our colleagues who are joining us here this morning by advancing on the agenda the two petitions that our colleagues Monica Lennon and Tess White have joined us for this morning to discuss. The first, therefore, of those petitions is petition number 1911, the Review of Human Tissue Scotland Act 2006 as it relates to post-mortems. And this has been lodged by Anne Stark, who has been an assiduous campaigner on the issue of this petition throughout, and I can see is with us again in the gallery this morning. The petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government I think my script is quite confused. The petition calls the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to review the Human Tissue Scotland Act 2006 and the relevant guidance to ensure that all post-mortems can only be carried out with permission of the next of kin, do not routinely remove brains, and offer tissues and samples to next of kin as a matter of course. And as I said a moment ago, we're joined again by Monica Lennon, who has followed this petition from time to time through its course. Good morning to you. Monica, just still 3 minutes. Throughout the lifetime of the petition, the committee has considered a number of issues concerning bereavement and pathology services. We heard about specific improvements that could be made, including the use of CT scanners for post-mortems and more choice for loved ones regarding the return of tissue samples. We took oral evidence from the Lord Advocate and from practitioners in England, and the committee has also raised several of Anne's points in writing with the Scottish Government, the Lord Advocate and the Royal College of Pathology. This work uncovered a lack of ministerial leadership to oversee and drive forward improvements to pathology services, and I had the opportunity at the conveners meeting with the First Minister to put this directly to the First Minister at its most recent engagement just before the recess. In writing to the conveners group, the First Minister has noted the cross-cutting nature of the issues raised in our work and highlighted the ongoing consideration of alternative delivery models for pathology. But I don't know that we actually got an answer to our question from him, despite him acknowledging that the lack of single ministerial accountability wasn't something we should be rushing in search of, but something the government ought to be offering us. But our last consideration of the petition on the 29th of May 2024, we agreed to write to the Scottish Government to set out our recommendations and conclusions following our work on this petition. The Minister for Public Health and Women's Health responded to our letter as Minister with portfolio responsibility for hospital-arranged postmortems and included views from the Office of the Chief Medical Officer and the Crown Office and the Procurator Fiscal Service. Now, the response reiterates the Scottish Government's view that it is essential for independent investigations into the cause of death to take place. The Minister also states that the Scottish Government does not support legislative change to offer tissue samples to next of kin as a matter of course. The provision of forensic pathology services currently being assessed by the Scottish Government, the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Services and other interested parties. The response also highlights that the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service is progressing a co-design process to prepare a business case for the future of forensic pathology services. Anne Stark's most recent submissions reiterate her call for the next of kin to be offered a choice in whether a post-mortem takes place in cases where the death is not suspicious. And that is what we heard evidence to support. And she emphasises the emotional distress this causes families and calls for change. Her written submission states that many of the systems in place are not fit for purpose and that the response from the Minister does not give a clear answer on the issue of leadership. And we are at a difficult impasse in terms of where we are in the lifetime of the Parliament. We're now into the final 12 months of the Parliament. We've done a great deal, I think, in relation to advancing the aims of the petition, and I'm not sure that the committee are entirely clear what more we can do in this Parliament. But before we come round to considering what our options are best open to us at this stage and what we might suggest, recommend for the future, I'll invite Monica Lennon if she'd like to contribute to the committee.
Thank you very much, Convener. It's now good afternoon. Can I begin by saying a heartfelt thank you to you, Convener, and to all of the committee for your extensive and thoughtful work. You have been considering this petition now for quite some time, and on behalf of the petitioner Anne Stark, who is here today with her husband Jerry, I want to record the family's gratitude to you, as well as my thanks to them for the personal sacrifices they have made in pursuing this petition, as always inspired by their much loved and much missed son Richard. And I think from your summary, Convener, it's clear that the progress that has been made wouldn't have been possible without the petition and the committee's work. So a genuine thank you. I'll come on to some of that progress. I think since the last meeting in May of last year, I know there's been a lot of work behind the scenes, but I think there has been some significant progress. Some real moments have occurred. But I think quite an honest reflection from yourself, Convener, that we're now at that difficult crossroads, both in terms of the time that we have left in this Parliament, and given the complex nature of this and the fact that although we've had some clarity, we still don't really know who in government is taking the lead on this and where responsibility lies. In your letter to the Minister for Public Health and Women's Health last year, you told the Minister that the committee had been quite struck by the lack of clear ownership over policy, direction and decision-making across post-mortem services in Scotland. I think we've had a better understanding of the Lord Advocate's role, which is a unique role, but it's still clear that there's no one organisation that takes responsibility for addressing concerns or leading on improvements. I think at one point the Lord Advocate kind of passed it back to the committee. So the petition is relevant and essential. I think that remains the case just now. What I wanted to touch on was some of the progress made. Your summary was very helpful, Convener, so I won't repeat those points. But I've also become aware through Anne Stark's direct meetings with the Lord Advocate that there will be a visit to the Coroner's Office in Lancashire, I believe next Friday, the 2nd of May. So that is really good news. I haven't been decided on the detail of that in terms of who will be included. Ideally, the committee would have been represented. I don't know if that's still possible. But I think that's a bit of a breakthrough because we've always felt that Scotland has been lagging behind and has been an outlier, not in a positive way, in terms of the choice and modernisation that we've seen in other parts of the UK and indeed other parts of the world. So it could be that the committee could ask for an update into the scope of that. And also, we believe that a pilot scheme into the use of scanners is about to be embarked upon, but we haven't had an update, and we understand that the Lord Advocate was going to update the committee. I'm not sure if that's happened ahead of today. So again, it feels like there's more work to be done around it. Again, going back to other parliamentary work, as well as this committee, we know the Criminal Justice Committee takes a keen interest. I think also of importance here is the HM Inspectorate's annual report of 2022-23, which made a number of recommendations and similar to your own work, Convener, reflected that fragmented nature of pathology services here in Scotland. And again, just to bring this back to why this really matters, you know, Anne and Jerry Stark have obviously had a terrible loss, and that was made worse because of the trauma of dealing with the system and dealing with services, of which there are many. So whether that's been communication with family, whether that's been you know, the lack of compassion around the issue of sample retention and that journey of discovery about Richard samples and having them returned to the family. It feels like we're making progress on scanners, although there's work to be done. But I think where the committee could do further work is around the issue of the Human Tissue Act. I don't think the Scottish Government has given proper reasoning as to why they don't support any change in the law in this respect. Why is it that next of kin in England and Wales are given a choice, including reuniting samples with the body prior to the body being released for funeral, or samples being returned to a family for a separate funeral at the appropriate time. Why is that not a choice that's available here in Scotland? And we know that there's been progress in Ireland in the last couple of years as well. I don't think the Minister, Jenny Minto, in her recent response has really given a proper reason for that. And I think it would be useful to probe that further. Clearly, it's a matter for the First Minister to organise his government and to make sure there are no gaps in ministerial responsibilities. The Minister has told the committee she has responsibility for hospital-arranged post-mortem examinations. I believe the First Minister has said that there will be a sort of light touch reshuffle due to circumstances, so it could be that this could be considered by the government, because the work that's coming forward in terms of the co-design of what the future of pathology should look like in Scotland, it's not clear if all of that sits with Ms Minto and her portfolio, or is there a role for Ms Constance and her portfolio. I think the government needs to perhaps put that in writing to this committee, as well as the Criminal Justice Committee. This continues to be a matter of importance for not just Anne and Jerry, but for all of our constituents. When I checked earlier this morning, more than 3,400 people have signed Anne's petition. And I think it was, really good that you were able to raise it with the First Minister convener at the recent conveners group. I did note his answer, but also the follow-up letter. And again, I think it's good that government is beginning to engage, but there's still a lack of detail, and that, convinces me that, it would be helpful to keep the petition open, given we're coming into this final year of the Parliament, given the interests from a number of MSPs and at least one other committee, and the fact that the Scottish Government are beginning to show interest, beginning to show that they do understand there needs to be change, but I feel that they've been quite vague and non-committal about what that change should look like. So if there's more written and oral evidence that could be taken, I think this committee is well placed to do so. I'll just conclude by saying that we haven't had, a full update about this visit to Lancashire and what the pilot would look like around scanners. So if the Lord Advocate hasn't written to the committee, I think that's something that the committee could do. And again, it's just a signal to people across Scotland that where there are gaps in legislation or policy, that there is a place in this Parliament where people can come and have their experiences heard, and that change can happen. We have made a lot of progress. It feels like there's still a bit of a journey ahead, and I would be grateful for the committee's ongoing interest in this matter, because it feels like there's more to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica Lennon. I do want to pay tribute to Anne and Jerry Stark. I think their commitment to this petition has been absolutely magnificent, and at times I think progress has been made, despite really some of the dryness of the institutional response, if I can put it that way, to some of what are, for individuals concerned, on whom their experience rests, but also seeking to improve for the opportunities for others, magnificent. There are three reasons why we could move to closure just now. One, the Scottish Government doesn't intend to amend the Human Tissue Act of 2006 to require consent from families for procreative visceral mortems. That seems to be their position. The Scottish Government does not support legislative change to offer tissue samples to next of kin as a matter of course, and the committee has extensively explored the issues raised in the petition, including multiple oral evidence sessions, a substantious letter to the Scottish Government and a question directly to the First Minister. However, there will come a point, I think, where political parties may have to start to engage with some of these issues, that there is only so far that the committee can take forward. Some of these things now, I think, I would actually commend to some of the party's health spokespeople to be becoming even more direct in terms of their ability to cross-examine ministers within the chamber. But there are two areas that Monica Lennon's touched on, which I think the committee might be sympathetic to us just allowing us a further opportunity to look at. One is it would be interesting to know what the outcome of this visit to the coroner's office is, because I think that is an incremental step in the consideration of the issues, which we've not been able to consider. And we will, I think, pursue finally, again with the Lord Advocate, the issue of the timing of the pilot that is supposedly taking place into the use of scanners, because even the acceptance of the use of scanners is something that has been on a journey during the lifetime of this, our consideration of this petition, from one of not seeming to know anything about them to having obviously subsequently, we heard terrific evidence in relation to their use elsewhere, to their use on that basis. So I'm happy to keep the petition open, recognising that we're getting to a stage in the Parliament where it may well be that a fresh petition in the next Parliament under a different set of considerations is the way forward, but we will take these two issues forward if my colleagues are content to agree to that.
Agreed.
We are. Thank you. So we'll do it on that basis. Thank you very much. The second of our continuing positions this morning is petition number 2136 to make non-fatal strangulation a standalone criminal offence in Scotland, lodged by Fiona Druitt. The petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to make non-fatal strangulation a standalone criminal offence. And we've been joined, as I said earlier, by our colleague Tess White. We last considered this last month, actually, on the 19th of March, when we agreed to write to the Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Home Affairs and to invite the Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Home Affairs to give evidence on the petition at a future meeting once a response has been received. The Cabinet Secretary's response states that officials have had discussions with operational partners on the petition and will continue to engage with stakeholders, including the petitioner. The Cabinet Secretary outlines the range of crime types under which a physical attack involving non-fatal strangulation could be recorded, including attempted murder, serious assault, common assault, robbery, rape or attempted rape and sexual assault. The submission states that where non-fatal strangulation is present within sexual offending, this will be reflected in the prosecutorial action taken. The response informs us that there is currently no individual marking used to record and monitor instances where non-fatal strangulation is reported as part of an offence. Similarly, regarding convictions, there appears to be no specific charge code for common assault where non-fatal strangulation is a component of the offence. Now, we have actually also been made aware that the Criminal Justice Committee, subject to final agreement at its meeting this morning, is planning to take oral evidence from a number of bodies on the issue of non-fatal strangulation. In those circumstances, a viable option for this committee is to refer this petition now to the Justice Committee, who are planning to take evidence on the issues arising within it. Before I seek the views of colleagues in regard to this, I will invite Tess White to address the committee.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you to the committee for allowing me to speak today. So it's very, very important that I support this very important petition. Unwanted sexual choking and non-fatal strangulation in cases of domestic abuse is pervasive among women, particularly women under the age of 40. And I'd like the committee to note the incredible work through their charity Emily Test, Fiona and Germaine Drouet are doing to stop violence against women in educational institutions. And Fiona is here today with the committee, just stressing the importance, and you know how that important it is that she's tracking this through very, very closely. And non-fatal strangulation must be a standalone offence. Historically, aggravators are not consistently applied, and nothing is likely to change despite any attempts that may be made to educate. Having an add-on actually minimises the severity and the seriousness of this particular crime, and not only for victims, survivors, but also perpetrators. And I will be brief, Convener and Committee. I've just got final points to make. One is I note that the Cabinet Secretary references the Criminal Justice Modernisation and Abusive Behaviour Reviews Scotland Bill as a potential legislative vehicle. However, the Scottish Government has made no commitment thus far to amend the bill in accordance with the petition. And I'd like to say, and I'm sure on behalf of Fiona as well, that to thank the committee for taking this seriously, to having this meeting a month after the last meeting and to recommend, as you've said, Convener, just now, going forward to the Justice Committee, which I think is the right place for it to go. So thank you to the committee for that. I think it's absolutely clear to the committee that we must tackle this pernicious problem before more lives are irreparably damaged and lost. And the lives and safety of young women and girls depend on it. So thank you, committee, for recommending that the Justice Committee take evidence and progress it.
Well, I'm hoping that actually will be the recommendation of the committee. Tess White, thank you very much. Do colleagues have any suggestions for action? David Torrance?
Convener, I'm in full agreement if we pass it over to Criminal Justice Committee, because if they're doing an investigation in it, they'll have far more time than the committee here just now. So,
and are we agreed? We are agreed, so that is the case. Yes, thank you very much. That brings us to a series of petitions relating to road infrastructure. Because at our previous meeting on the 2nd of April, we heard from the Transport Secretary, Fiona Hislop, and officials from Transport Scotland a number of road infrastructure-related petitions. And this provided an opportunity to explore general issues affecting the trunk road network, as well as updates related to the individual petitions that we've been considering throughout the lifetime of this parliamentary session. The first of those, and those petitions are 1610, upgrade the A75, and PE 1657, the A77 upgrade. And the first of these petitions, PE 1610, upgrade the A75, lodged by Matt Halliday, and PE 1657, A77 upgrade, Donald McHarry on behalf of the A77 Action Group. Petition 1610 calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to upgrade the A75 Euro route to dual carriageway in its entirety as soon as possible. And 1657 calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to dual the A77 from Ayres Whitlets roundabout south to the two ferry ports at Cairnryan, including the point at which the A77 connects with the A75. And this is one of the ones we considered with the Cabinet Secretary on April 2nd. The committee heard that £64 million has been spent on the completion of 5 major improvements to the A77, including the Maybole bypass, and that over £50 million has been spent on 6 major road improvement projects on the A75. We also heard that work is progressing to design and assess options for creating a bypass at Springholm and Cocketfield. The Scottish Government held an initial meeting with the petitioners in March and has set regular 6-monthly meetings between their campaign groups and Transport Scotland. And the Cabinet Secretary stated that given the existing promises to dual other roads, it would not be realistic to commit to any new dualling. Do members have any comments or suggestions for action? David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if a committee would, in light of the evidence, I wonder if a committee would consider closing petition P 1610 under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that the Cabinet Secretary for Transport stated that it would not be realistic to promise new dualling in relation to the A77 and the A75. The Scottish Government has completed 6 major road improvements on the A75, and work is in progress to design and access the options to bypass Springholm and Crockford on the A75. And regular 6-monthly meetings have been established between the petitioner, Transport Scotland and AME, and the committee has undertaken significant work to explore issues raised in the petition.
Are colleagues content on that basis? Then thank you. It's an important petition, but I think in the light of the Cabinet Secretary's evidence, we thank the petitioners, but for the time being at least, that draws to a conclusion our consideration of petition 1610. And in relation to petition number 1657?
I wonder, in light of the evidence of the committee, would consider closing 1657 to close a petition under Rule 15.7 of Standards Orders on the basis that the Cabinet Secretary for Transport stated it would not be realistic to promise the new dualling in relation to the A77. The Scottish Government has completed 5 major road improvements on the A77, and regular 6-monthly meetings have been established between the petitioner, Transport Scotland, AME, and the committee has undertaken significant work to explore issues raised in the petition.
Colleagues, are we content? We are content, and so we will draw our consideration in this Parliament of this petition to a conclusion as well. Petition number 1916 requests a public inquiry into the management of the Rest and Be Thankful project. This was lodged by Councillor Douglas Fillon and Councillor Donald Kelly, and it calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to instigate a public inquiry regarding the political and financial management of the A83 Rest and Be Thankful project, which is to provide a permanent solution for the route. And again, this was part of our session with the Cabinet Secretary on April 2nd, when we heard that capital funding will be available when it is needed to progress various stages of the A83 project, with the estimated cost of the permanent long-term solution between 408 and 510 million. And the Cabinet Secretary told us the process for commenting on draft orders for the medium and long-term solutions ended in February. Transport Scotland officials talked about the civil engineering challenges of this project and suggested that the procurement stage could take 12 to 18 months, followed by 3 to 4 years for the construction period. This indicative timeline is, of course, dependent on factors such as whether a public inquiry on the draft orders is required and weather conditions during the construction period. Members will be aware of the particular risk of landslips on the route. Do colleagues have any suggestions for action? David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. In light of evidence from the Cabinet Secretary, I wonder if the committee would consider closing the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standing Orders on the basis that the preferred route for a permanent solution to landslip risks on the A83 Wressingby-Fancourt has now been identified. Draft orders for both the medium-term and long-term solutions were published in December 2024, with a period for submitting objections ending on 7th of February 2025. And Transport Scotland are now in the process of considering representations and objections on the draft orders.
Thank you very much. Our colleagues agreed. Then, again, I think we draw our consideration of this petition to a conclusion in this Parliament. Petition number 1967, protect Loch Lomond's Atlantic Oakwood shoreline by implementing the high road option for the A82 upgrade between Tarbert and Inveranen. This has been lodged by John Urquhart on behalf of Helensburgh District Access Trust and the Friends of the Loch Lomond and the Trossachs. This petition calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to reconsider the process for selecting the preferred option for the planned upgrade of the A82 between Tarbert and Inveranen and replace the Design Manual for Roads and Bridges, the TMRB, based assessment with more comprehensive transport, Scottish transport appraisal guidance. At our previous meeting, again, the Cabinet Secretary referred to improvements that are already benefiting road users and communities along the A82, such as the new viaduct at Pulpit Rock and the bypass at Crinlarich. We also heard that concerns similar to those put forward in this petition were previously raised with Audit Scotland, who investigated and confirmed to Transport Scotland that they had considered the requirements contained in the STAG guidance and reviewed relevant evidence, with the auditor concluding that the STAG process had been applied in the initial stages of the work in the A82. The Cabinet Secretary was also candid in saying that because of the interaction between the A83 and the A82, it would not be appropriate to work on both roads at the same time. And as a result of safety issues and economic importance, the A83 would be the route of the two prioritised. We explored the process for considering the various proposed options, including at what point in the process the STAG appraisal or DMRB guidance is applied. Officials also indicated that dialogue is continuing with the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park Authority on the detail and make-up of the preferred route option. The Cabinet Secretary also told us that consideration has been given to the feasibility of combining with adjacent schemes to make sure that the tree line and other environmental aspects are considered. And the Cabinet Secretary emphasised there's still time left in the process to address issues related to the landscaping and interaction with Loch Lomond's natural environment. In the light of that, do colleagues have any suggestions as to how we might proceed? David Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if the committee would consider closing the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standard Orders on the basis that Audit Scotland have investigated concerns about the application of the STAG guidance and concluded that the STAG process had been applied in the initial stages of the work on the A82. The Scottish Government has previously stated it is unwilling to carry out a reappraisal of the preferred route options for the upgrade to the A82 between Tarbert and Inveranen, and it would repeat work already carried out and result in a considerable delay and additional cost, and so confirmed that members of the public and other stakeholders will have the opportunity to provide formal comment or objection to the proposed scheme during the statutory consultation period, and that Transport Scotland officials are continuing to engage with the National Park Authority on the detail and the make-up of the scheme, including discussions on how to incorporate active travel facilities throughout the whole scheme in a sympathetic way.
Are colleagues content to proceed on that basis? We are. So again, this draws to a conclusion our important consideration of this petition during the lifetime of this Parliament. Petition number 2132 to publish a timeline for the dualling of the A96 between Inverness and Nairn by Easter 25. The last of these road petitions is this one then, and it's been lodged by the Inverness Courier, and it calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to publish a clear timeline for the dualling of the A96 between Inverness and Nairn and the construction of a bypass for Nairn, ensuring that this timeline is made public by Easter 2025, which ended 2 days ago. During the evidence session on the 2nd of April, the Cabinet Secretary confirmed that procedural steps for acquisition of land had been concluded, and we understand that Scottish ministers took title to the land in question earlier this week. We also heard that the potential use of the mutual investment model to fund the dualling of the A96 from Inverness to Nairn is currently being consulted on as part of engagement with industry, with the Cabinet Secretary indicating that the timetable for this project will be determined by the type of procurement the Government decides to progress. The Cabinet Secretary indicated a willingness to provide a statement to Parliament on dualling the A96 Inverness to Nairn bypass before the end of the current session. That's a statement, at least. Mr Ewing also raised the certainty that providing a long-term plan for road infrastructure plans can provide for both the public and contractors, noting the approach taken in Germany over a 30-year period. Now, while the Cabinet Secretary acknowledged this constructive suggestion, she also highlighted the challenges in adopting such an approach, particularly as we await the outcome of the UK Government's capital spending review, which will subsequently inform the update to the Scottish Government's infrastructure investment plan. Do any members have any comments or suggestions for actions? Mr Ewing.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I should declare a very strong interest as the constituency MSP for this section of the A96 and a campaigner for dualling for 3.5 decades at least. I do think that the Cabinet Secretary's evidence raised more questions than it provided answers. So I would respectfully suggest that we do write to the Cabinet Secretary to seek clarity on a number of issues. Firstly, what progress the Scottish Government is making to develop a detailed timeline for the dualling of the A96 between Inverness and Nairn and the construction of a bypass for Nairn, given that the acquisition of the land is now about to take place or is about to be completed. And secondly, whether the expected statement to which you've alluded, Convener, to Parliament on the decision on the use of the MIM, the Mutual Investment Model contracts for the remaining sections of the A9, will also include an update on the use of MIM as a procurement option for dualling the A96 between Inverness and Nairn, or if the Cabinet Secretary expects that there will be separate parliamentary statements, one for the A9 and one for the A96. There are three other brief issues that I wish just to include in this letter to the Cabinet Secretary, Convener. First of all, that the Auditor General has expressed some criticism about the use of MIM, and it would be interesting really to hear the Cabinet Secretary's response to that. Secondly, you've made reference to the review of the capital budget, but of course the capital budget this year is over £6 billion, and it is to be expected that it would be of that order for the next 10 years. In other words, 50 or 60 billion pounds over the next 10 years. By my reckoning, the combined cost of the commitments on the A96 and the A9 would be far less than 1/10 of that. So what the Cabinet Secretary hasn't ever done, Convener, and I think what we might usefully invite her to do is say, why can't we use the existing capital budget and design and build options? Because it does seem that if the Highlands are to be attributed the priority that I believe they should be given, then there is more than enough money for the Highlands to have these investments in these roads, given the likely scale of the capital budget historically and going forward. And lastly, there is considerable concern in the industry that the method of procurement as at present, and indeed under MIM as well, which may be unpopular for some contractors because they wouldn't be able to bid against European companies because of the scale of the contracts, that a framework approach should be used, as is used by Scottish Water and SSEN, where a number of companies are qualified to obtain work over the next, say, 10 years, and that considerably reduces the costs and bureaucracy involved and provides certainty for the companies that they know they will have an order book. And it also means that we can get our roads contracts delivered, because otherwise the civil engineering contracting companies in the Highlands may well choose to do other work, such as pump storage, railways, grid upgrade, wind farms, housing, health, and so on, which may be less risky and more profitable. So even if we after 15 years of dithering and indecision on funding, convener, resolve the funding issue, there are increasing worries, which Graham Barn has expressed of SICA, that even with the funding, we may then find that there's nobody left to come to the ball. There's no dance partner, there's no contractor, because they're doing other work, which has to be done to the scale of around 50 to 60 billion pounds in the Highlands alone over the next 10 years. So sorry to speak at such length, not for the first time, I dare say, convener, but I hope that the members will agree that each of these issues are issues where we should seek answers now and not wait until the very fag end of this session of Parliament. And lastly, would I thank the Inverness Courier for its campaigning efforts to stand up for the people I represent and the people that read the Inverness Courier.
Thank you very much, Mr Ewing. Well, there was a fairly comprehensive set of recommendations. I see the clerks have been scribbling furiously as we try to keep up with the various additional thoughts as to how we might proceed. Are colleagues content to keep the petition open and proceed as suggested?
Agreed.
We are. Thank you very much. That brings us to petition number 1962. Excuse me just a second. To stop motorhomes parking overnight with formal campsites. It's down as two words. I usually say it as one. Out with formal campsites, caravan parks and areas. Our next continued petition is lodged by Lynn and Darren Redfern, and it calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to improve the licensing arrangement on motorhomes to ensure they are only parking in designated and regulated locations. Last considered at our meeting on the 15th of May 2024, and at that time we agreed to write to the Scottish Government. Their response to the committee highlights the £4 million budget allocation for Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund. The submission also highlights £2 million delivered through Visit Scotland, which includes support for activity to spread visitor numbers more equally across Scotland. On the visitor levy, the Scottish Government states that it remains open to discussion with stakeholders on the issue of a levy on motorhomes and camper vans, and will consider any developed proposals that work to support the visitor economy. The submission states that discussions with council and land management stakeholders have highlighted significant issues with such a levy, excuse me, including potential difficulties in application, administration and compliance. A written submission from the petitioners highlights a number of concerns about safety and what they believe is a disparity between the licensing requirements for campsites and a lack of regulations for landowners. And the petitioners call for all locations that offer overnight motorhome parking to be required to obtain a licence, including car parks and laybys. And the committee has also received a written submission from an individual, Mr Ed Hall, who raises questions about when land should be considered a campsite with the requirement to obtain a licence under existing legislation. Colleagues, do we have any suggestions for action?
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if the committee would consider writing to the Scottish Government seeking its views on whether, in the interest of safety and parity with formal campsites and areas, landowners who allow overnight motorhomes habitation should be required to obtain a licence for this activity.
Colleagues content? We'll keep the petition open and proceed on that basis. Petition number 2024 to create a national public information programme to raise awareness of the impacts of steroid selective androgen receptor modulators and other performance-enhancing drugs. This is lodged by Cale Scott and calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to create a national public information programme to raise awareness of the impacts of using steroids, selective androgen receptor modulators and other performance-enhancing drugs, PEDs, And this should include a particular focus on the impact of young people between the ages of 16 and 25, working with community learning and development practitioners, gyms and community coaches to raise awareness, and developing a public health campaign to highlight the negative impact of PEDs, encouraging regular health check-ups for users, and a screening programme allowing users to test the safety of their PEDs. And we last considered this petition on May 29th last, when we agreed to write to the Minister for Drugs and Alcohol Policy. The Minister then, our late colleague Christina McKelvey, responded to the committee on the 27th of June. And obviously, since this is the first opportunity that this committee has had, I would obviously like to offer my condolences on behalf of the Parliament, behalf of the committee, to all those who continue to mourn her loss. In her response to the committee, the Minister confirmed at that time that the focus of the Early Interventions for Children and Young People Working Group has been on treatment service in general, and it has not considered image and performance-enhancing drugs specifically. The response also mentions work to develop a framework, including treatment standards for children and young people being supported for any drug or alcohol problem, which is expected to support the introduction of the Charter of Rights for people affected by substance use. And as our papers note, the Charter was then launched in December 24. And the response also states that the Scottish Government policy on iPeds remains that it will continue to support Police Scotland in tackling any criminality, and will continue to support local treatment and recovery services to provide help for people who have been impacted by drugs of any kind, including iPeds. We have also received a submission from the petitioner, which responds to the Minister's submission and draws our attention to the mortality risks associated with iPad use, an estimated death rate of more than 550 people per year in Scotland. The petitioner also highlights that many iPads are legal and available to purchase online, and suggests that the Scottish Government's position of working with Police Scotland to tackle criminality, as well as a lack of local advice services, will result in no action being taken to address the risks, including death of iPad use in Scotland. So not terribly impressed. Do members have any suggestions as to what we do in the light of both the information we've received and also the petitioner's submission? David Torrance.
In light of information received, Convener, I wonder if the committee would consider closing the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standard Orders on the basis that a Charter of Rights for people affected by substance abuse has now been introduced. The Scottish Government's policy on image and performance-enhancing drugs is that it will continue to support Police Scotland in tackling any criminality. It will continue to support local treatment and recovery services to provide help for people who have been impacted by drugs of any kind, including iPads. And in closing the petition, I wonder if a committee wished to write to Health and Social Care and Sport Committee to highlight a petition and ask that the issues raised in it are considered as part of a further work for cross-committee scrutiny of matters related to reducing drug deaths and tackling problem drug use.
Are we content to proceed and to write to the Health and Sport Committee as Mr Torrance has suggested? We are. Petition number 2079 to introduce legislation to provide for exemptions in paying medical facility parking charges and to create a new classification of parking badges for caregivers, lodged by Martin James Keating. Last considered at our meeting on the 15th of May last, when we agreed to write to Disability Equality Scotland, COSLA, Carers Scotland and the Scottish Government. And we've now received responses from all of those organisations, which are detailed in the papers for today's meeting. And in its response, COSLA state that it is, and I quote, fully committed to supporting unpaid carers and supports the local implementation of the cross-government carer strategy. The response goes on to note the importance of parking charges as a source of income for local authorities and suggests that further work would need to be undertaken to quantify the cost of the petition's proposed policy and how potential lost revenue could be reimbursed to local authorities. The Scottish Government response highlights that the Blue Badge scheme is designed to allow disabled people who experience severe barriers in their mobility to park closer to their destination and only applies to on-street parking. The Government suggests that a separate concessionary scheme such as a carer's badge would represent significant challenges around administration, its resourcing, enforcement and then measures to prevent fraud and misuse. The response also offers information on the introduction of the carer support payment, which became available across Scotland in November last. Further benefits, including the carers allowance supplement, may also be available to carers on low incomes, and unpaid carers are encouraged to contact their social work department or local carer centre to find out what support they may be able to offer them. Now, Disability Equality Scotland has provided information on the financial challenges experienced by disabled people and expresses its support for the introduction of legislation to provide for exemptions in paying medical facility parking charges for disabled people and the creation of a new classification of parking badges for those providing transport to disabled people for medical reasons. Similarly, Carers Scotland have shared information from its State of the Caring 2003 survey, some time past, which found that 29% of unpaid carers supported the person or persons they care for with 10 or more medical appointments in the previous year, while 69% of unpaid carers visited community pharmacies to collect prescriptions on behalf of the person they care for. The Carers Scotland response also draws our attention to work being undertaken by Edinburgh City Council to develop carers permit, which would be limited to those who can evidence they are in receipt of DWP carers allowance, now Social Security Scotland's carer support payment, or the carers credit. It is Carers Scotland's view that the petitioner's proposal to introduce a carers permit has merit and warrants further exploration by the Scottish Government. And I wonder if colleagues have any suggestions as to how we might proceed.
Thank you, Convener. In light of evidence, I wonder if the committee would consider closing the petition under Rule 15.7 of Standard Orders on the basis that no NHS facility in Scotland has car parking charges. Local authorities are responsible for managing wider car parking policy, including deciding on whether exemptions should apply, as well as having a responsibility for administration and enforcement of a blue badge scheme. The Scottish Government has now introduced the carer support payment nationally, with further financial support available to eligible carers through benefits such as a carers allowance supplement. And the Scottish Government considers that a separate concessionary scheme, such as a carers badge, would present significant challenges, including around administration, resourcing, enforcement and measures to prevent fraud and misuse.
Mr Torrance has offered a suggestion as to how we might proceed. Are colleagues content to proceed on that basis? We are. So we do thank the petitioner for bringing this particular issue forward, but in view of the position as identified to us from the inquiries we've made, I think we feel that that is as far as we can take the petition in this session of the Parliament. That brings us to agenda item 3, which is the consideration of new petitions. And as I always do, to anybody who might be looking in for the first time, just to explain that we take advice from the Parliament's independent research body, SPICE, and also an initial thought on the petition from the Scottish Government, in order that we can expedite progress of the petition, rather than just meet to determine that that's the first two things that we would thereafter do. Petition number 2139, the automatic expulsion for children charged with committing a crime against another child, is lodged by Maria Giordano, and it calls on the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to introduce an automatic expulsion for children charged on suspicion of committing a crime against another child. And the petitioner's view is that victims are treated worse than the perpetrators. And she notes that in some cases an accused person goes on to share a classroom with the alleged victim. Now, the Schools General Scotland Regulations 1975 state that an education authority shall not exclude a pupil from a school under their management to which he has been admitted, except where they are of the opinion that the parent of the pupil refuses or fails to comply or to allow the pupil to comply with the rules, regulations or disciplinary requirements of the school, or they consider that in all circumstances to allow the pupil to continue his attendance at the school would be likely to be seriously detrimental to order and discipline in the school or the educational well-being of the pupils there. The Scottish Government's response to the petition states that exclusion from school, other than in conformity with the terms of the regulations, has no statutory authority and may be open to legal challenge. And for this reason, its position is that it would not be lawful to employ a policy of automatic exclusion without considering the individual circumstances of each case. The submission then states that the Scottish Government has no plans to change the law on exclusions. The Scottish Government states that where staff are alerted that a young person has been charged in connection with an incident involving another pupil, school staff should follow the advice of Social Work and/or Police Scotland about how to manage this situation while the young people attend school. Do colleagues have any suggestions or members as to how we might proceed? Mr Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if the committee would consider writing to stakeholders seeking the views on the action called for in the petition. And the stakeholders would include COSLA, Connect, formerly Scottish Parent Teacher Council, Children and Young People's Commissioner Scotland, Together, the Scottish Alliance for Children's Right, and the Scottish Youth Parliament.
Our colleagues, given that the Scottish Government has said it's got absolutely no intention of doing anything about it, are colleagues nonetheless content to seek the views of those organisations notwithstanding? Then we will. Petition number 2146 to allow the use of privately sourced donor eggs and NHS-funded IVF treatment, lodged by Jamie Connolly. And this is to allow couples and individuals to purchase altruistically donated eggs from private clinics for use in NHS-funded IVF treatment, and to instruct NHS Scotland to create a clear clinical pathway to support those using private donor eggs. The Spice Briefing explains that large NHS-hosted clinics provide both private and NHS fertility treatment with separate waiting lists, and those in receipt of NHS treatment are fully funded by the NHS. Those who do not meet the criteria for NHS treatment can be offered private but fully funded, fully self-funded treatment. The self-funded treatment is mostly provided by NHS service at cost. However, NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde is slightly different in that it partners with the only private clinic in Scotland to provide paid-for care. And this private clinic is a not-for-profit clinic with partners with an egg donation supplier in Spain. The briefing notes that many private clinics will source donor eggs from suppliers abroad. However, there are risks associated with sourcing eggs abroad and with their transportation. The petitioner and his partner were told that the likelihood of getting donor eggs through the NHS would be, and I quote, minuscule, as the waiting time is potentially over 30 years. He reports that the NHS in Scotland operates on an all-or-nothing policy, meaning if patients source eggs from elsewhere, they lose all funding for IVF via the NHS. My goodness, you'd actually have to register at birth. For 30 years to be of any use to you at all. The Scottish Government's response to the petition states that it has always been clear that couples who are eligible for NHS fertility treatment should not pay for any aspect of their treatment, and this includes the purchase and use of donor gametes. The response states that couples who require an altruistic egg donor may wait between 3 to 4 years for treatment. This wait time can change depending on donor availability. And the Scottish Government is aware that NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde is planning several campaigns this year to recruit egg and sperm donors in a further effort to reduce waiting times. Do members have any comments or suggestions for action? Mr Torrance.
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if the committee would consider writing to the Scottish Government to ask for a more detailed response to a petition, in particular to a suggestion that those facing significant waiting lists for donor eggs should be able to use an ally-donated, privately purchased donor egg for NHS treatment. What data is available to support information about NHS waiting times for couples who require altruistic egg donor, and whether a waiting time can exceed 4 years, and if so, what the longest waiting time is, and whether it believes NHS boards are currently meeting the needs of couples who face a significant waiting list for donor eggs that could prevent them from receiving treatment at time to have a biological child.
Thank you very much, Mr Torrance. Are we agreed?
Yep.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the formal consideration of petitions, and our next meeting will take place on the 7th of May. Thank you to those of you who have been following our proceedings. We now move into private session.